in the sun, underrated again. Show business and never love you the way you love it. We come and we go, they quick to forget. So every bougie event I attend, I tell them this. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Yo, look. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Spent about 2 racks on handmade do-rags. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. That's everybody from sports to college class to rap and back. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's black. Everybody be asking my 6th album, my last. I'm super sick of this business. My daughter missing me, nigga. The whip is bullet repellent, but they gon' kill me with tax. Niggas really on clout, they ain't checking for stats. Who a decade or better, give niggas decade of rap. Respect is in order, hate me better, do it loud. Root for everybody black. Haters say that's crazy.
Clear. Because racism is real. But in order for us to make the next step with racism, we got to do right by ourselves first.
But, hold on, but the thing about that, I hear that a lot. That's easy to say for somebody who has been illuminated and understand. But we got to understand, if you read Frantz Fanon's Black Skin, White Mask, most black people look at themselves through the eyes of white people. So we treat ourselves like the people who we want to be like.
Yeah.
The way that we wear our hair, that's the reason why it's so important, the state.
Peace, family. Welcome to MaatSpeaks. And welcome to another conversation. I'm so happy that you joined me today. I see you all in the chat, so I'm going to send my shout outs in just a moment. But I have 2 wonderful ladies that are joining me today. But before they come on stage, I just want to do, my normal housekeeping here. So remember, here at MaatSpeaks, if you're new to the channel, or if you're not new and you just need a reminder, here at MaatSpeaks, we are aimed to demonstrate how to maintain, uphold, and build a code and culture through the principles of Ma'at. And those principles: balance, harmony, truth, order, justice, reciprocity, and righteousness. So we begin by applying these principles to ourselves, then extend these principles to our families and ultimately our communities. As you enter, make sure to hit that like button, share this very important conversation, share, please share, and make sure to subscribe. So if you're not subscribed, subscribe to the channel. And you can also support the channel in a few ways, as you know. So we have, let's see, you can buy me a tea at buymeacoffee.com/MaatSpeaks, or you can also donate to the channel through the Cash App, MaatSpeaks. Venmo is also MaatSpeaks, and my PayPal is Gen Health Revolution. Don't forget that you can also go to my website, generationalhealthrevolution.com, or you can follow me on Instagram as well. You can put the moderators, you can put the all of that in the chat for me. So that's a few ways. I just want to give a shout out. I'm gonna wait on shout outs. So let's take a look here at the chat and see who we have here today. Okay, so I'm going to wait on the chat because I see a comment that I want to touch on. So I'm going to kind of wait there. Okay, so again, family, here at MaatSpeaks, we can get deep. Now, this conversation, just from different things I was looking at on YouTube, social media, it can be triggering for some. So I ask that as you enter, you prepare to open your minds. We have been given a filter that most of us are accustomed to seeing through. And I ask that you just open your minds. We often jump to defend only what we know and forget that there is so much that we don't know. So it's very important, as I do, as the ladies on who are joining me today do, we have to continuously study, research before jumping to defend what we do not know. So ask questions. Let's engage in the chat. Let's engage in healthy debates. But this platform was designed for learning. I learn from the others who come on. I learn from you in the chat. So let's begin to start building with one another, learn from one another. And so we want here at MaatSpeaks, we want to induce a different perspective or filter so we can consciously heal ourselves, name ourselves in a way that is native to who we are. So I started this channel for us to heal ourselves, our community, and build with one another so that we can create a world that our children and future generations do not need to heal from. Okay, so I just ask that you be respectful in the chat. Be respectful of the ladies on the panel, be respectful of me, and also shout out to my moderators. Inya, thank you, sis, for always being here. And my divine compliment, my husband, Just DeWitt. I also, they are doing a great job being moderators. So I just ask that you also respect them, and I trust their advisement. And so if you are respectful, they'll ask, being disrespectful, they will ask me whether, you need to go. So with that being said, we are going to start the conversation. So I have two wonderful ladies here. I have someone who is new and who I know is going to add so much value to today's conversation. And her name is Rhonda Sekhmet. And I just want to thank you for coming and joining this conversation today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. And also, no stranger to this platform. You know who she is. She doesn't really need a formal introduction, but my sister, Hanifah, thank you for joining today.
Peace, everyone. Peace, everyone. Maat, thanks for having me. It's an honor. It's always an honor. And thank you for being here with us, Rhonda. It is a pleasure. I think this is the first panel publicly you and I have been on. So I'm glad to see you here, sis.
Thank you. So thank you, ladies, for joining me. I'm so excited about this conversation. Ever since I spoke to the two of you about a couple weeks ago about it, I've just been excited to have it. So before we jump into the conversation, I do want to shout out the people in the chat. So Dr. Jones, he said, Black men are not traditionally racist. Women are susceptible to identify as racist towards white and Black males. The double standard is that males are typical robbers. We are race specific. Okay. Thank you for that comment. We're going to jump into that very soon. Peace, Just DeWitt. I gave you your shout out. Inya. Thank you once again for being here. And let's see, TR Baby. Thank you for being here. I'm always happy to see that you are in the chat. TWP Popcorn. Thank you for being here. Always happy to see you as well. Okay, let's see. Anyone else have anything to say? Oh, Rico. Peace, Rico. Thank you for joining today. Arjan, lurking and listening. Peace, Arjan. Thank you for joining. Okay, let's see. Just going through. I don't want to miss anyone. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone who is in the chat today, who is joining the conversation. And I want you to chime in. And as we go along, ladies, you know, if you want to jump in there, just jump in. If you see fit, I'll ask you questions as well. So we are going to start with the video. And I got this idea because when Hanifah was doing her live, she had made a comment about David Banner and how she didn't necessarily agree with the comment he made. So we're going to look at the video and then we're going to jump into that discussion.
Said that black people aren't racist enough. Yep. What does that mean? When I said that black people are not racist enough, what I meant is that by nature, God, he, she, or it, made us what we are for a reason. Ants take care of ants, lions take care of lions, tigers take care of tigers. Historically, white people are supposed to take care of themselves first. What a lot of people don't understand, it's a fight, and it's about genetic annihilation. Black people are at war and don't even know it. You know, we think shit is fair. We think it's religious and everything gonna be all right in the end. It's fucking not. If we don't do for our people, if we don't create for our people, it will never happen. Because white people are supposed to put their people in their movies first. It's their shit. So what we should do is make our own shit. The only problem is, if we do become more racist, like I think we should be, then all they're gonna do is come and burn down our fucking communities, or stick the feds on us, or COINTELPRO, like they historically have, which means we must protect ourselves too.
Okay, I'm going to stop there, and I did forget to put the disclaimer about the language, but you know, there it is, and also the disclaimer as well, understanding that copyright disclaimer, that able to use these things as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, education, and research. Okay, so let's talk about that. So just initially, your ladies, what do you feel about what David Banner said? So whoever wants to jump in first.
Well, my first thoughts on it is what is his definition of racism? Mm-hmm. Because I think that is important into even responding to what he said in terms of black people should be more racist. Because if you think of racism socially or economically, you know, I think that makes sense. But if you're talking about racism as a system of oppression, then to me, it doesn't make sense, especially because we are currently under a system of oppression. And the only way that we could participate in racism is by participating in that system or creating another system of racism.
Okay, that's a good point. Hanifah, what do you say to that?
Sorry. I don't necessarily. Okay, so when I hear him speak, I realize that what he's describing is not racism. I think he means to use another word. I think he is using the word racism here incorrectly. I don't necessarily think that's what he's describing, right? I think he's describing pro-blackness. I really think that's which, depending on the mindset of the person hearing it, depending on the how can I say, the knowledge of self of the person hearing it, they can easily label pro-blackness as racist, right? I know that's a thing. We all know that. Many black people have said, me loving me doesn't necessarily mean I hate you. You get what I'm saying? So I think what he's describing is not necessarily racism as we know it, because racism is multi-layered, right? But I do agree with him with two things he said. Black people are at war, and a lot of us are completely unaware of that, because we think if no one is coming and dropping bombs in our houses or coming and kicking down our doors as yet, and this is happening in certain capacities, right? Unjustly, even if we're not aware of it, and we're not aware of it until it makes it to the big news, right? The sister that died, whose house they kind of kicked in the door and they just started shooting. Her name isn't coming to my mind. Young sister. You think of stories like that. So it is happening. And the second thing that he said, we think shit is fair. That right there, that right there is, I mean, we could talk about that all day, because a lot of our people feel like the acquisition of a certain amount of things, material things, mean that we are now at the same level and playing field as those who have oppressed our peoples for years, centuries, and have more than a head start, right? But you think because you've acquired a PhD that somehow now you are on their level. You think because you make six figures that you are on their level. And that lets me know that you do not understand the layers of racism. So those are the two things that I agree with, but I really feel that what he is describing is not necessarily racism. I'm going to leave that there for now.
Okay, so with that being said, let's look at what racism is. So what is racism? So here's the thing when it comes to definitions. Definitions carry middle. So if you go in the dictionary, right, you're going to see a word and it has like 20, it can have like 20 definitions, and it depends on how you are applying the definition. So there are several different, and even when you, depending on who you speak to, there's different definitions of racism as well. So let's look at this, the Merriam-Webster definition. So that definition is a belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial difference produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. So let's think about that. A belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. So I really kind of want to dive into that whole idea of inherent superiority. So we know that white people have, they have a superiority complex. Like, it's kind of like ingrained into our society for them to have that superiority complex. So when you look at the definition of superiority, it's the state of being greater or better than something or someone. So I really kind of want to dive into that in the whole idea of superiority or superior genes. So to me, there's kind of a science of superior genes. And it's not even the whole idea, because we have to be careful, because I know, it can be triggering to hear like, oh, you're saying we have superior genes, and so, because we see through, we see through their lenses, for one. So we see through their lenses, we see through white lenses, we see through that white filter. So it's hard to have this discussion. So when I say superior, it's more about who is resonating with nature, who is, and so I'll use more of inferiority kind of thing. So when you're trying to conquer nature and everyone around you, you're not necessarily resonating with it. You're not complimenting it. So when you talk about superiority, there's a difference. So there's a difference between superiority in our social constructs and then within science. So science says one thing about superiority, and then our society has said another thing about superiority. So I'm going to share a short article here, and I'm not going to. I'm just going to share an article, and we'll go from there. So let's see here. Okay, so here it says, let's make sure you can see that. Let's see. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can make that bigger for you. Let's see. Okay, that's a little bigger, and let me take this down. Okay, so good gene hypothesis. It says in biology, an explanation which suggests that the traits females choose when selecting a mate are honest indicators of the male's ability to pass on genes that will increase the survival or reproductive success of her offspring. Although no completely unambiguous examples are known, evidence supporting the good genes hypothesis is accumulating, primarily through the discovery of male traits that are simultaneously preferred by females and correlated with increased offspring survival. For example, North American house finches prefer to mate with bright, colorful males. Such male finches also have high overwinter survivorship. This preference suggests that mating with such males will increase offspring survival. So this is, and in this article, it talks about this is hypothesis in the early 1980s. So with that being said, it's a whole idea, and this is a whole different conversation, and I'm not going to delve too deeply into the science and all of that, but Elder Professor Kaba stated that when Africans that turned white, again, whole different conversation, not here to even delve into that, but he said that these pale-faced white people who were Africans at one point and then, got lost in the Ice Age and turned, that what they would have done if they resonated with nature or understood, they would have found the biggest, blackest African to procreate with. And that would have better continued, the whole lifeline species or whatever you want to say. So understanding that it's not about a particular group being superior, but it's more about how we thrive in the environment that we in. So it's more about what is inferior in this plane of existence. And so I know that's kind of like, maybe saying the same thing. So scientifically, maybe we could say that they are inferior, but for example, so if we were in the Ice Age or in a colder climate, maybe they would be superior. And I'm talking about genes. I'm just talking about science. I'm not talking about intellect. I'm not talking about anything. I'm just talking about the genes, the dominant genes. But we see this. We see this in sports. We see this creatively in music. If you look further into the pineal gland, how genes are passed on because of the higher percentage of eumelanin. And so Professor Kaba would go on to say that if there's other people on other planets or in the universe and the galaxies or whatever, they would still be dark-skinned, melanated people because of what the cosmos are made of. So what happens is, to me, your environment is highlighting, because your environment is highlighting your inferiority, you now have to assert your dominance by political, religious, and the misuse of science and history. So there's an example of that. Before I go on and kind of just highlight examples, there's so many examples throughout history, but I'm going to highlight something that's more recent. But before I go on, I just want to ask the ladies if they have anything to say to that. No? Okay. And I just want to shout out to the people who came in the chat. Not sure how to say your name, but Peace Hotep. And let's see. Rico said he is speaking of Black protectionism, which is an honorable thing, but it sounds twisted with the misapplication of such. So saying misapplication of, I'm guessing you mean misapplication of racism. And so, okay. And then let's see if we had anybody else come in. Okay, so a system of oppression with the idea of superiority by people who define themselves as white over non-white people of the world. Yeah, so it is. Racism is used as a system of oppression. And it's the idea of superiority. And that's what I was kind of saying within that. I was saying that in essence, they're not superior, but they assert it by other means, asserting their dominance, asserting their quote unquote superiority economically, politically, all these different kind of things. And isn't the selection of mate is determined by environment and conditions? Yeah, so how you can thrive in those conditions. So that's kind of what I was talking about with that article. So your environment is going to dictate how you thrive in a certain environment. So if you, and it's kind of incumbent on us a lot of the times, to pick the male that is going to make sure that we survive. And this is not like political wise. This is really just generationally, species wise. We think so like right now, but we're talking about like generationally. So, okay. So moving on from that, this is to me an example of someone being inferior in their present state and then asserting their dominance. So I'm just going to share this. I'm not trying to get in trouble, but I'm going to share this because this was an example. So I'm going to share this, y'all. And so most of you probably have heard of this. Let's see here. Okay, so most of you heard of this. The transgender swimmer sparks outrage by shattering women's record. And so the reason I'm highlighting this because it's an example of being inferior in one place, but then asserting your dominance. So this particular and this is an article that another article that I'm reading. In the article, it says, just how much of advantage did Leah Thompson possess over biological females? So it paints a clear picture that at the University of Pennsylvania, the swimmers soared from a mid 500s ranking. So this person was 554th in the 200 free freestyle in all divisions. And this is in the men's competition. But then ended up, and just last year was actually competing as a male, and then ended up competing in the women's division and also showed that they broke records, got first place, and there was outrage about that. And so not just touching on that lightly, but what that to me is showing is this has to do with rules set in a socio-economic system, which rarely has anything to do with us. So, when I think about things like this and how they set the rules, to me, it's more about imperialism as opposed to racism. So to me, imperialism, and I'm going to show the definition here of imperialism. Let's see, did I put that in there? So So we have imperialism. Okay, I can't put the word in there, but okay. So imperialism is the state policy, practice, or advocacy of extending. Hold on, y'all. That's gonna bother me. Okay. Okay, so the state policy, practice, or advocacy of extending power and dominion, especially by direct territorial acquisition or by gaining political and economic control of other territories and people. So, with that being said, imperialism to me is more dangerous than the idea of racism. And so I just want to touch on that and the whole idea of like imperialism versus racism. So, ladies, if you could chime in there and tell me what your idea of imperialism versus racism.
Well, my definition of racism has always been systemic. So I think that my idea of racism is probably closer to the definition of imperialism that you provided. And I for me, it was important for me to see it that way because I think so many people see racism as like a social thing, like someone just not liking you or treating you bad. But we have to realize that this is war on our people. And if we don't see it as, as David Banner had mentioned that it is war, if we don't see it that way, then we're going to approach it totally different. And I think also with that, with the definition of racism that's provided in the dictionary by white people who created racism, it's a euphemism, it's a very, I don't want to say nice way, but a very light way of talking about something that is very violent. And it also makes it seem as if anybody could do it. Anybody could just pick up racism and do it. So they could say, if I say something like, I don't like white people or I hate white people, then they can call me a racist. And then that completely removes, again, the violence, the system of racism, the systemic way that it is and systematic way that is implemented by this group of people. So for me, my definition of racism that I use, which is it's listed on blackawakeningmovement.com, which is my organization, that it actually is a network of systems and practices that oppress a group of people. And again, it's kind of more resonant of imperialism, domination, hegemony, these type of things. And I think it's important for us to see it that way. But I like that you brought this into the conversation because I think that distinction is important.
Okay. Yeah. So, Hanifah, do you have anything to add on to that?
Okay. So I'm just looking at this definition. The state policy, practice, or advocacy of extending what? Power and dominion. Right? Especially by direct territorial acquisition, right? By territorial acquisition. We know what that means. Okay.
Right.
We know what that means. Or by gaining political and economic control. Okay. I want you to look at certain words: power, dominion, control, acquisition, right? That is by force, control of other territories and people. Imperialism is nothing but an extension of racism. That is all it is. We can look at them as separate as if we want. You will not have the need to control, to dominate, right? To be above, to be more powerful, if you are not racist, if you don't see yourself as superior, you think that you have a right to other people's territory, to acquiring other people's territories, right? Racism drives that privilege in your mind, that right. You have a right. What do they call it? divine what destiny or something like that.
Manifest destiny.
Manifest destiny. Thank you. That is racism. So there can be no imperialism without racism. You have to actually, you're talking about dominion. You're talking about dominion. You're talking about control. You have to have a certain mindset to even think about dominating and controlling a certain set of people. In fact, you have to actually see those people as lower than you, of not deserving the land in which you found them on, right? As less intelligent. You have to perceive people like that first before you even get to the place of controlling and dominating them. Racism, a racist mindset drives that. So for me, imperialism ain't nothing but an extension of racism. And that's really all I have to say on that. I just have to go back over the definition again. But yeah, when you see words like power, dominion, control, all of that, right? When you see that, that's a very Eurocentric way of navigating the world and perceiving the world. That's once you start seeing those types of words, that's where that comes from, right? A need to be in control and be in charge, right? It comes from a very, very insecure place. Okay, so as I was reading the definition, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, that's because imperialism ain't nothing but the damn, how can I put it? You know how the church has its missionaries? That's what imperialism is to racism. That's all I can say about that.
Yes.
So with that being said, it's a question of navigating that then. So if we are navigating this, we understand that we are in an imperialist state, and saying that they want control, they want dominion in everything that's in this definition, they have done several times over. What do you say about navigating through that so that we are putting our communities, our people first?
Well, I think you kind of said it in the question is putting ourselves first. We've been programmed to do the opposite. We've been programmed to put everyone before ourselves. And I really think that's what David Banner was really talking about, is putting ourselves first. That's how I interpret it. He's talking about prioritizing ourselves, forget about everybody until we get out of this situation. And I definitely think that's something that we need to do. And I think that's something I have not seen us do collectively as a people before, is to put ourselves first and to not be concerned about how people are going to react from the actions that we do that are necessary for our survival. A lot of times we don't do things because we're afraid of how white people will respond to it, or we're afraid of the consequences that may come from it, or we may be afraid to lose these little bit of benefits that we have within the system of racism, white supremacy. And so we keep ourselves from doing the things that we need to do to actually survive. And so I think that's what it's about, is to put ourselves first.
So can survival look like some of these actions though? So if you're in war, we're in war. If you go to war with someone who is trying to rule and have dominion over you and control over you, wouldn't that look, because it's always like, when we talk about the victor tells the stories. And so to the victor, you look like the hero, or to the person who's a part of that victor's, space, you look like a hero. But to the other side, to another country, to another group of people, you look like like the destructor. So what we have to take on, and I'm not going to say take on those traits, but it's not going to necessarily, I think when we talk about us being in war and us having, Black power, whatever you want to say, and being unapologetic in our, Blackness, or unapologetically African, whatever you want to say, I think we see it so much as like laying back, being peaceful. But when we talk about war, doesn't that look in a way that's going to look destructive? it's kind of like walking through or going through something painful in order to get to the good part. So wouldn't that, in essence, in order to not even dominate, but in order to get out of from under oppression and domination, would it look closely like what they are doing? Because we're not thinking of it as oppression. Like, we're not seeking to oppress anyone, but we are seeking to get out of control. So I think about someone who's wrestling. In order to get from under, they have to do something in a way so that they can get on top. And so then in essence, they look like the oppressor. So what, I think when we talk about this, it's kind of like what is the word I'm trying to use? It's almost like a pacified way of looking at what it really means to go to war with people who have been dominating you for hundreds of years.
Yeah. I mean, I think in terms of how it looks, I think it depends on who's looking. I think when it comes to white people, nothing we do is ever going to look good to them when it comes to our liberation.
Right.
Even with something like the most innocent thing is kneeling during the Pledge of Allegiance or the what is it called? The national anthem, that they get mad about that. They're going to get mad no matter what we do, no matter how innocent, no matter how lightweight it is. So for them, nothing we do is ever going to look good. So I think for those who are interested in actively doing something, that should be irrelevant, what white people think about it. But I think also in our own heads, because we've internalized that oppression, and we've internalized some of those things that white people say to us when we get ready to do those things, that sometimes we are afraid to do it, because now we're telling ourselves in our head, like, oh, this is destructive, or this is violence, or this is not the African way, or whatever it is. When really this is self-defense. This is not, I don't even think we've gotten anywhere close to really, I would say, like, engaging in active warfare or doing anything that's destructive, because at this point, everything that African people do is self-defense, because we've been attacked for 400 years. Mm-hmm. Like, there's no way that any response that we have, no matter how violent it is, could be perceived as anything but self-defense by those who know the circumstance that we're under, and who are not just wanting to keep us from getting out of it. Right. So I think that it may be uncomfortable. It may involve a physical retaliation, but I think if you're clear about the situation that we've gone under, and you care about liberation, and you care about freedom, then I don't think it so matters, how it looks. I think it's more of kind of, I think that's the part of the process too, is overcoming that internalized oppression, that internalized fear that keeps us from feeling like we're doing something wrong when we're actually doing something that's right for us, and that's something that can free us.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it was when slaves were running away, they were saying, like, it was a either a mental disorder, or it was some of those things. So we've internalized certain things, like, for our freedom. We have internalized fear because of what they have put on us. And that's why I say all the time is, I talk about killing that white man inside of you, but also just that filter that we have. So anything that looks like, because most of the people, when you look at who is calling one another racist, it's a lot. I was watching this video and it was just, and they were saying, there was a whole group of people in the room, and it was Black people and non-Black people. And all the non-Black people were saying Black people couldn't be racist. And it seems like they were kind of like, dancing around with their words too, because they were in a room full of Black people. But also, they were all saying that they don't think, and they gave good reasons why they don't think Black people could be racist. But then, like, several Black people in the room, and then even when you look at the comments, several Black people in the comments are saying, yes, Black people can be racist. Yes, 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 yes. Like, constantly, like, giving into that whole idea of Black people being racist. So So yeah, like I really think that it's something that we have to start understanding, because in the point I was really trying to get to was also that when it comes to it, it's not going to look pretty. That's what I'm really wanting people to understand. When we talk about our freedom, it's not going to look pretty. Like over the years, whenever we were trying to get any kind of right, it's not going to look pretty, you know? So it's kind of certain different concepts that I think we have to understand. Because when we say war, we're not really thinking about what war really entails and what the people who need to be on the front line, the people who need to be in the back, people who need to be doing things on the, you know, on the sidelines or whatever. But it's not necessarily going to always look pretty. But that's, I think we also tend to just want to be okay in our moment in time. We just want to be okay. Like we just want to, like, you know, I don't want that trouble. I don't want that hard work. But then we're not thinking about the generations that are coming after us. So I really think that we have to understand what that really means when we're talking about wanting to get freedom and wanting and when we say that we're in a war. Hanifah, do you have anything you want to chime in?
Sorry, I'm over here struggling because my okay, I got it. I was trying to figure out my pencil. Um, so one of the things that I wanted to add to the conversation around racism is this. A lot of us, a lot of Black Americans, a lot of us Blacks who are living in America, I think it's very important for us to understand that racism is universal. Okay. I think that's very important because what can easily happen is we start to look at other we don't because we don't see it outside of the space in which we find ourselves. We think that Black Americans are the issue, that they are imagining racism, right? Dr. Francis Cress Wilson said that racism is a universal operating system of white supremacy and domination in which majority of whites worldwide participate. Okay? So the reason why I said I think it's important for those of us who are Black in America to understand racism as a global phenomena, right? That it is universal. And what does that mean? To look in other parts of the world, even the parts that like to pretend that they don't have racism, and see the different ways in which racism exists so that you can understand the beast that you're actually up against. Because if you think of racism as this isolated problem that's just in America, you are already defeated. You are already defeated in your mind, because you then begin to think, okay, then it's just here. So maybe it's the Blacks in America that have an issue with, progress. Maybe it's the Blacks in America that's constantly making excuses for why they can't get ahead. But no, racism is a global thing. It is a universal thing. It is important for us to understand how racism shows up in other parts of the world. It is important for us to understand how, if you look in Brazil, if you look in South America, if you look in India, if you look in all parts of the earth, the darker you are, the lower you are on the totem pole. It's important that we understand that as Blacks in America, right? Because we tend to really think we're the only ones experience racism. And I understand why, because of the history of chattel slavery in this country. But no, racism, slavery was able, in the capacity it happened in America, was able to happen because of racism. Let's be clear. Okay? Racism is at the top. Capitalism is just the economic system of racism. I mean, we can go on and on. Like, racism is at the top. It is the umbrella. All of the other isms that we start talking about is directly, right, bastard children of racism. Okay, I do not know who their father is, but I know that their mama is racism. Okay, so this is why I'm saying they are bastard children. So I want us to be clear on that racism is a global phenomenon. It is universal. It is not just happening here in America. It is just not happening to you and I in America. It is happening across the globe. It just manifests itself in different ways depending on where you're at. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm gonna check the chat here. Let's see here. Hold up, ladies. I agree with you all. He used the word racist subjectively. I took his statement as being a separatist more beneficial to us collectively, applying their nature always. Okay, that's a good point. And yes, should a man who dresses as a female go into the men's prisons or women's prison? I mean, if they want to take it there in sports. That's where it gets confusing, Enya. 3 hearts for the 3 beautiful ladies and the free lesson education tips. Peace to you, TR baby. Let's see. Maybe one and the same, imperialism or race and or racism. So I think what the ladies are saying here is that imperialism and racism is synonyms or really for one another, or one is it's synonymous for one another.
Imperialism is racism's missionary.
Yes.
Okay. And peace to you, Dante. You said one who deceive will always find those who wants to be deceived. That's an interesting quote. Trying to see how I feel about that. One who deceives will always find those who wants. Wants. That's the word that I have a problem with. Wants to be deceived. I think that sometimes it's easy for people who are master manipulators and deceivers to deceive people. Okay.
Ma'at, can I say something?
Yeah.
Else? And so, okay, so one of the things coming into this, I'm like, usually we try to, how can I say it? Minimize the definition or the impact of racism. This is why you will have people that say, no, of course Black people can be racist. Of course, and this is usually for me, I feel like this is for those of us who don't really want to directly face what racism has done to this planet, right? To this earth. We don't want to face the reality of it, right? So we want to say things like, oh, we're all racist. You know what I mean? Because to say we're all racist, then we could kind of like dismiss it like, it's just this human trait, this is what we do as human beings, right? But then to actually point out that there's a specific group of people who function, right, in that racist ideology, right, who create paradigms, right, with that are rooted in racism, right, who perpetuate racism through economics, through education, through religion, you can go on and on, right? To say that there's a specific group of people means now that we have to face that group of people. And I think a lot of us are too cowardice to do so. We don't even forget fighting. No one is saying throw a punch. We're just asking you to acknowledge it. And a lot of us are struggling with that first step of acknowledgement. And don't get me wrong, racism is multi-layered, right? Because we have internalized racism that a lot of our brothers and sisters deal with. Okay, these are your set of privately held like beliefs and prejudices. Okay, about a certain set of people, perhaps your people. A lot of our people deal with that, and then the other end of it is there are white people who deal with the internalized racism as well. These are the people who they'd be like, I'm not racist. my family was not plantation owners, right? But they don't want to unpack how they benefit from the system of racism, right? And their privileges, okay? So So then you have what we call interpersonal racism. And I think that's when people say Black people can be racist. I think that's what they're trying to speak to.
Yeah.
The interpersonal racism, right? Between individuals. Huh?
Right.
That's what they're trying to speak to, okay? And then you have the institutional, and then we have the structural racism as well, right? So it's multi-layered. Racism is just not one thing, because when you talk about systems, you're talking about all the things that come under that system. So now you have to talk about the educational piece, right? You have to talk about religion, how that is used, all of that. So yes, racism is multi-layered. Racism has a whole lot of other isms and schisms under it, right? It has a whole lot other arms of function as well. But at the end of the day, at the root of it is still racism.
Right.
And a lot of us want to just focus on the interpersonal racism, which is bullshit. Excuse my language. At the end of the day, because at the end of the day, if Rhonda is white and I call Rhonda I don't know, a cracker, can I use that word? If I use a derogatory term to describe Rhonda, that takes nothing away from Rhonda. Rhonda walks away as a white woman. She can still feed her family. It doesn't remove the roof over her head. It does not disrupt her life whatsoever. Okay? Now, Rhonda, because of the system that's in place, she can go from calling me the N-word to then blocking me from getting a loan from the bank, to marginalizing me in certain zones so that my children can have access to certain levels of education. Okay, I can go on and on. Why can she do that? Because she has a whole system behind her that helps her in her racist views. Black people do not have that in America. That's all I wanted to add.
Right. And you touched on some things that I do want to touch on. I'm going to go through the chat real quick. Okay, so Rico said, but are not all minorities victims to pleasing the sensibilities of the oppressors? Yes, we are Black, as Black people do it, but I see all others do as well. No excuse, but I think the issue is the supremacy.
Yeah, the white supremacy.
Right. And so I think we often do this thing, and this is not personal to you, Rico, but I think we do this thing about including other minorities in our talking points and things like that, because even we'll say things like, oh, well, we're racist against other minorities and things like, we say so many silly things, but so yeah, I mean that's true, because you're talking about that goes back to what imperialism is, and the territorial acquisition that is a part of the Eurocentric mindset. And so they also colonize other groups of people as well. So when we're talking about, especially here in the United States, where most of us are, we're talking about how they also have that we are also feeding into their thinking. And so we're not the only ones that do it, of course. When it comes to what I talk about, is mostly talking about it as far as Black spaces. But at the same time, yeah, they also are a part of that. And what happens a lot of times too, when it comes to other groups of people, and more specifically minorities, I believe, is that they can use them to further push us down to the bottom. So they also use them in other ways to help their cause. And you're seeing that a lot more in you're seeing that. I'm not going to say too much to that. So could you put the website of Rhonda's organization? Rhonda, Black Awakening Movement, is that that same website you gave me?
Yes. Oh, wait, no, not the one that I gave you in the beginning. I'll type it in the chat.
Okay.
as well, so you can share it. But it's blackawakeningmovement.com.
Oh, okay. All right. So blackawakeningmovement.com, and then the moderators, y'all can put that in there. Okay, so Pan-Africanism across the board, even what we know as Dominion today, was shaped through Eurocentric perspective. And that's even a good point, because we have, and I think me and Hanifah had this conversation too about the whole idea of, because we have been in this predicament for hundreds of years, and Hanifah had made a good point previously that we don't really know what it's really like outside of these walls that are the United States of America. So do we really know what it's like to thrive in our natural state? You know, because we've been here for hundreds of years. So from generation to generation, we have dealt with things. We have been in full survival mode for hundreds of years. And so that is something that, you know, most of our perspectives, most of our filters are white. You know, it's intentional. I talk about this all the time. You have to be real intentional with unlayering your white filter. And it's funny because it kind of makes me think of Hanifah's live when she talked about the mask, because once you take off one layer, you got to take off another layer.
Yes.
Once you take off that one filter of whiteness or white supremacy, you got to take off another one. And so that is a very true statement. Let's see. So unconscious, conscious. Okay, so another comment here: forcefully acquiring power and dominion over territories and peoples is a construct of slavery in its various forms, from the town hall to the halls of Congress. Yep, that's true. Let's see here. I'm not going to even try to say that word. Oxford reference a form of mania, supposedly affecting slaves in the 19th century, manifested by an uncontrollable impulse to wander or run away from their white master. Yes, that's exactly what I was talking about, Dante. Thank you for putting that.
And can I just say one thing on that? I think that sometimes we look at like historical forms of racism and we think that it's gone, but this is still happening today, where people who actually want to get free are considered to be crazy. These are the ones that we consider to be out of their minds, because they fully understand what this is and they want to get away from it. I was listening to Baba Baruti recently talking about when he was teaching at a historically Black college, and how he was labeled a psychopath, you know, because of the way that he taught to his students and the way that he viewed racism. So I think that this concept, even though it's, you know, it looks different today, but still to this day, those who want to get free are viewed as crazy or erratic, and everybody else is considered to be normal.
But it lets you know the mindset of the. I mean, listen, this definition here, drapetomania, right? When you understand drapetomania, the fact that they coined that phrase, right, lets you know how the sciences were even used against us, or weaponized against us. Psychology. I mean, it lets you know this is something that they coined.
Yep.
Drapetomania. You must be insane to not want to be enslaved. You must be insane. You must be insane if you want to escape plantation life. You must be insane, right? So what we are going to do is, and this is still happening, this is a diagnosis. I want to make this clear. This is not just some term. Drapetomania was a diagnosis. This is science being used, being weaponized against our people to keep them what, Ma'at, when you go back to the thing of imperialism, to keep them controlled and dominated. Because how dare you not want to be subjugated by me? Me? Good old white me? How could you not? I mean, I feed you. You know, even though it's all nothing but trash and leftovers, this, I want to be clear, this is a diagnosis. Look it up. Do the research. Drapetomania was a real thing that they were diagnosing, right? Your ancestors who had the guts, the gall, the audacity, right, to try to escape. And it says supposedly affecting slaves in the 19th century, manifested by an uncontrollable impulse to wander. No, they wasn't just wandering. They were trying to get away, to wander or run away from their white master. An uncontrollable impulse. They diagnosed our ancestors with this baloney. And this is science being weaponized against us. And that's something I have written down here in my notes as well, as far as racism. Neely Fuller says it best. He says it best. He says, if you do not understand, let me read it for y'all. If you don't understand racism and white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else you think you understand will confuse you.
Yep.
Everything else you think you understand will confuse you. I think of all the category, all the sciences, biology, psychology, right? They even went as far as creating a whole thing called Egyptology. Let's get ahead of it. Let's whitewash this before they get wind of it, right? Let's get to this. So this is where you have Runoko Rashidi, right? What's his name? Tony Browder. This is where these people have to step in and inform our people. Why? Because they done went in and dominated this sector, right? And whitewash it. This is all about genetic survival, domination, and control at the end of the day. So I wanted to speak to the drapetomania thing. This is one example of science being weaponized against us.
Yes.
Both great points. So much we can dive into that. I just want to kind of speak to that because we even see how that is still being carried over to even that filter of blackness, because when you say I am separating myself from these institutions, whether it's a job or whether it's whatever it is, different institutions of white supremacy, we have Black people say, are you crazy? Like, we can't live without them. You know, so it's a part of our psyche now, where it's like something has to be wrong with you if you think that you can survive, you can live without white people. And even what you're even saying, we don't even understand how deep it goes, how many parts of sociology, psychology that they use in order to manipulate us on a daily basis. They tell us what to think, they tell us how to react, they tell us what to feel. You know, even though the latest thing that everybody's talking about, Will Smith and Chris Rock, nobody would have been caring about that unless they told you to care. Now you can disagree with me if you want to, but they told you to care about it. And so now everybody is caring about it. So this is happening continuously, and they use, I just want to make sure that we understand that they are using psychologists and sociologists and the sciences, the social, this is made up stuff, right? Like, it's not really based on science when it comes to a lot of the things, how they even categorized us as far as like skull shape and all these different kind of things, and use our skull shapes to say, oh, based on your skull shape and your complexion, you are inferior. So what happens though is that they are continuously using that, spending millions of dollars in order to manipulate us into what we're thinking. So separating from that is actually coming into your senses, because you're right. Not if you're constantly being manipulated by what is being put in front of you, you're not in your right senses. Like Dr. Wade Noble said, it's the tornadoes of the mind. Like you are literally insane walking around in this this society it's kind of an insane mentality, because it's not who we really are. It's not who we truly are. Once you separate that from that, you know, I say all the time, like, the truth looks crazy to people who are living a lie. Like, the truth is going to look crazy to people who are living a lie. So that, I mean, it, you know, that's what I just wanted to touch on, that because that is so important for us to understand. So it's truly unlayering. That's what this is. Unlayering these different concepts and understanding. And all you have to do is look this stuff up really yourself, and see, why do they have so many sects of sociology? Why do they have so many psychologists who are being put into the advertising business? Like, why do they have all of this? You know, so why do they have it? It's to constantly manipulate us. So I'm going to look at some more comments here. Peace to Sir Hell. Thank you for coming through. Okay, and so Dante said, do you agree with Renard Williams when he said you can't talk about how Black lives matter until you talk about how Black lives come about, which is through relationship? What do you mean by relationship? Are you talking about relationship as far as coupling? Or are you talking about just relationships? Because I kind of need more context with that. You can't talk about how Black lives matter. Black lives come about.
Yes, he's talking about coupling, because he's saying,
Okay.
do you talk about how do Black lives come about, right? Where are Black children coming from?
Ah,
Yeah,
okay.
right.
Got you.
No,
I
I'm
do.
laughing because I was like, shout out to the divestors on that comment, because
And it reminds me of the conversation you sent me, Hanifah, when she said when we I'm not gonna say the lady's name, because you know I don't agree with a lot of things she says, but I agree with some of the things that she said. And that whole concept of when we start talking about what makes up a Black person, and what that actually means, like, and that's a whole different conversation, so I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, if we want to talk about Black lives, we do have to talk about how they come about. Yeah, I do agree with that. Thank you for clarifying that for me, Hanifah. So Dr. Umar Johnson was correct when he said Black people don't want freedom, we want a better existence. Ooh, yes, we want a better existence through oppression. Yes, he hit the nail on that one. Yes, I agree with that. A lot of us don't want to separate from this oppressive society to speak. We just want to be more comfortable in our oppression. So yeah, it's not much I can say to that.
I think one time I had mentioned that this is why like we celebrate the first this and the first that, like the first Black this and the first Black that, like it's such a big deal for us. And the reality is, like, you celebrating, let's say, the first, I don't know what you call those people that deal with, like, maybe they're the first Black person to make it as whatever that title is, but they are the ones that are helping create bombs that they're going to drop over there on the continent. Do you get what I'm saying? So for me, it's very difficult, because when I see the advancement and of our people, I love to see that. But it saddens me that we take our best minds and our best talents and we use it towards the expansion and advancement of whiteness at the end of the day. So it's almost like it's a very conflicting feeling, because it's like I'm proud that that person, knock down some doors and break some barriers and so forth. But then now to do what with that, right? What you have acquired, what is it that you're about to do? And most of the times, our people are using it towards the advancement of people who don't even love us, right?
Yes.
Towards the expansion, towards imperialism, like we talked about earlier, which in turn means that you are now a tool in the hands of racism. Without realizing it, so we get so caught up in the, but they're a billionaire, right? Or they did this or they did that, but we that's as far as we go. And I feel like as a people, we really have to begin to think deeper. And the reason why we got to think deeper is because racism is not a shallow thing. It's very, very deep. It's very, very layered. And so really just perceiving it or observing it from a shallow place is actually problematic, and it becomes more detrimental because you begin to participate in the very thing that is created to destroy you. You begin to participate in your own destruction. So
yeah, that's a good point, and it comes. I think when I think about that, I think about, because a lot of times when we talk about these people who are billionaires or who have, loads of money, we don't talk about how they got the money. We don't talk about what that was built on. And then we have to, and then we can hold ourselves accountable and say that we're participating in that. When it comes to cell phones, computer, we're all on these things, right? But we are still participating in something that is still oppressing people that look like us. So, it's a point of, where do we start holding ourselves accountable in these different situations? We can sit here and we can say, well, these people are billionaires and we want to participate in this society. Or we can say, like, we can get really, because there's different levels to how serious we can be about our freedom and how we are participating in our own demise. So, it's a very good point, because most people are not going to give away their technology, right? Like nobody's going to give up their technology. But when we talk about holding someone else accountable, we also have to still hold ourselves accountable into what we are actually participating in. So Rico says Black people can be bigoted and prejudiced, but never racist. So I have a differing opinion on whether Black people are bigoted and prejudiced, but I'll get to that. Let's see. Okay, he's talking to Rico. Freedom comes with a great responsibility. Yes, that is correct, and just kind of what I was speaking to. Arshawn said, I disagree with so much. Hopefully I get a chance to talk about this soon. So Arshawn, if you want to come up, I will put the link up soon. If you want to come up and have the conversation. I believe Black Americans can be racist, but it's just that my people will instead be racist toward each other. That's the problem, because don't love each other. So I hear this a lot. I heard this someone who is from I'm not sure where he was in Africa, but he was talking in a group setting, and he was like, he's very adamant about Black people being racist. And then he even said, he was like, yeah, Black people can be racist because a lot of Black people are racist. Black Americans are racist against me. I'm African. So I think a lot of times we do that. And I think that goes to what Hanifah was even saying about interpersonal racism. But I think we have to understand that that's not necessarily racism. We can call things like xenophobic. We can call things like Rico said, bigoted, which I have a different opinion. But because xenophobia is when you have prejudice against someone from a different country or a different culture. So sometimes we're talking about that. We're not necessarily talking about what racism is, which to me, racism is power. So in essence, like as a Black American, I'm not necessarily trying to have power over an African if I felt that way. I don't feel that way against my brothers and sisters all over the world. But if that was the case, it's not to me about power. Maybe we are struggling for a position. Maybe we're trying to struggle for us to be one on top of another, which I think a lot of us do. But I don't think it's actually racism.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, any as Sister Hanifah was saying earlier, this is all under the race. This is all under the umbrella of racism, white supremacy. So even xenophobia and any type of stereotype or misconception that we have about people from another place has come from what we've been indoctrinated with through racism, white supremacy. There's no negative ideas about Africans that we haven't gotten from white people.
Yes, great point. That is a great point. So that's a great point. The effects of how we feel about one another is coming from white supremacy. That's an excellent point. Great responsibility is greatly overwhelming to many. However, freedom asks that of every one of us as individuals and as a group. Yep. Yeah, I was out of touch, but it wasn't because I didn't know enough. I just knew too much. Does that make me crazy? Yep, I love that line. How much are we willing to lose to taste true freedom? You know, I wonder if we should think of it as losing something, but more of gaining.
And if I could say something quickly on freedom, I feel like in response to what was said earlier about Black people rather be comfortable within oppression rather than to have freedom, I think most of us don't even have a concept of freedom. I don't think any of us have ever visualized ourselves outside of racism, white supremacy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, even when they develop a concept of freedom, it's still within the context of the system.
Yep.
Some of us see freedom as just replacing white positions, and we think that's some form of freedom. And I have to, in defense of my people, we've been going through this for centuries and generations. So like our parents didn't have a concept of freedom, and their parents didn't have a concept of freedom. So like we're so far removed from what freedom even looks like that we can't even imagine within our minds what that looks like. And I encourage people to do that, to even take time to even think about what that would look like for you to actually be free, because most of us have never really thought about it. We just think about money or certain positions, and maybe some other different things, but a lot of us don't even have a really realistic concept of what freedom actually looks like for us. And again, we haven't seen it in this generation, so it is hard to imagine. But I think that it's essential for us to get a concept, because if not, it makes sense why people choose just to be comfortable within this, because we don't think that we're getting something better. In fact, some people think that being free from white people is something worse. So if we don't really know what it is or what it looks like or what it feels like, then we're not going to fight for it.
That's a great point. And honestly, that's a conversation that we need to have as a collective. I would actually love to have that conversation, because I think you're right. I think we don't know what freedom actually looks like. We don't know what it feels like. We don't even know what's like, how we talk about manifesting something, and it's hard to manifest something when you don't even really know what that feels like. So to really embody what freedom feels like, I think David Banner had said, he said, we have to make it appealing. Like we have to make like consciousness appealing. Like it's not appealing. Like if you hear like, most people think when you say freedom from white supremacy or freedom from or creating our own communities, to most people that doesn't sound appealing, because we know that they run everything. So it's just like, what we're gonna be living off the grid, what about water? What about cable? What about internet? So a lot of times, freedom doesn't sound so appealing to people, or just being a part of this, Black movement, it doesn't sound appealing. So we have to understand what that really truly means, and understand that there are some things that are happening in other parts of the world that can, create the change that we want to see. But we're especially here in the United States, there's a certain concept of what we feel like freedom is supposed to be, or what we feel like luxury is, and things like that. So great point. I am going to get back to the chat. I see a lot of comments in the chat, but I don't want to derail too much from the conversation, because there's some things I see in the chat that does apply to the conversation that we're having. And I'll get back to the chat. So I'm going to move on to even the etymology of racism. And I want to look at the suffixes first. So let's look at the suffix of ism and ist. Let's see, make sure. All right. Let me make this bigger. Okay, so ism, that is a belief or condition. So like they gave the example of Judaism. So you believe in that Jewish religion. And then ist, a person. So a person who does this particular thing. So let's look also at kind of the etymology of this. So let's look here. Make sure y'all can see this. Okay, let me make that bigger. Okay, so ist, word forming element meaning one who does or makes. Also used to indicate adherence to a certain doctrine or custom. So from French, you know that a lot of the English language, you know, bastardized language coming from a lot of different places. And directly from Latin, ist, from Greek, agent, noun. I'm not going to read all of that. From Old French, on false analogy of, and then from Spanish, popularized in American English, 1970s by names of Latin American revolutionary movements. So we kind of see how that kind of came into play. And then we have the next thing I want to share is the etymology of racism. All right, so by 1928, in common use from 1935. So originally in a European context, racial supremacy as a doctrine, the theory that human characteristics and abilities are determined by race. And compare with racialism. And so it's applied to American social systems from the late 1930s. This meaning of nationalism in no sense implies any consent to the doctrine of racism, which holds that unity of racial origin is the main principle of unity for civil society, and that the members of each ethnical branch should properly aim at grouping themselves together into so many national states. Although it is desirable that strongly felt national aspirations, which often depend on community of race, should be satisfied as far as this may be compatible with justice. Racism, or the principle of racial self-determination, as it has been called in recent years, is a materialistic illusion contrary to natural law and destructive of civilization. So this was in the universal aspects of fascism. Okay, so that is just something I wanted to touch on really quickly. I'm going to remove that. Okay, so I was sharing that because of understanding the origin of something. And do we go based off of the origin or of what something means today? So I'm going to share this video. It's going to be about 4-ish minutes. And I just want to hear what you ladies have to say about that. And anyone in the chat, also share your thoughts as well. So one moment while I share that. All right, I can see that. All right, let me play.
Elijah Muhammad, what about him?
He was racist. I used to listen to him in New York, radio. He speaks racism.
Okay. Well, let me explain.
He said that we were created by evil scientists.
Let me explain. The question from the gentleman in the front is, wasn't Elijah Muhammad indeed a racist? The gentleman says that he used to listen to him on the radio in North America, I believe, in New York. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he says, refer to white people as blue-eyed devils, and that they were created by a mad scientist in a laboratory or something like this. Okay, first of all, like America. First of all, let me say, you know, when you say racist, you've really got to understand, first and foremost, look, when you have not a prefix, when you have a suffix to a word, I like the fact that you're wearing your bow tie. It means that you're an intelligent man, so you will understand what I'm saying. When you have a suffix, when you have an ist at the end of the word, it is something that is informing you about the expertise or the quality or the skill involved in that particular thing. For instance, a pianist, a violinist, a scientist, a racist. Okay, why do you have this suffix? It is because when one is proficient in the violin, one becomes a violinist. When one is proficient in science, one becomes a scientist. When one loves his race, one is a racist. However, it does not necessarily mean it has to be in a negative way. For instance, let me explain, please. Let me explain. When Elijah Muhammad was born in 1897, racism was in the world. That's right. That's right. Right? You agree with me? Okay, so don't talk about Elijah like he invented racism. Racism was in the world. The slave master came for us in 1555, 400 years ago, and we can take it back beyond that. However, the point I'm making is this. Now, with Elijah, you got to understand now that he was born into a world where he was witnessing black men being lynched. He grew up in that era where black men were hung for no reason, where we were subject to all manner of disgusting treatment and disgusting laws. Ku Klux Klan killing us, burning us at the stake for no reason other than the fact that we were black people. Now, when Elijah Muhammad, look, the Jews, Adolf Hitler engineered a program where he caused 6 million Jews to be killed in gas chambers during the Second World War. Go to any self-respecting Jew today and ask them, what is Adolf Hitler? And they will tell you he was a devil. That's right. What is a devil? The word devil is a term that means, the word devil is a term that means one who devalues, a devaluer. Those Jewish lies were valuable in the eyes of God. But here is a man that comes along now and takes away the value of human beings and destroys them as a human reality. That is the act of a devil. This book, Quran, talks about the devils and talks about people, human beings who are devils in the manifest evil that they do. Now, that was over 4 years that Hitler was doing his devilishment. We can count back 400 years of the most brutal treatment. Look, they took my name, my language, my culture. They killed my mother, my father, denied me religion, disallowed me to read or write for over 300 years, reduced me to the level of an animal where they branded me on my chest, branded me on my buttocks with a branding iron. And they called me 3/5 of a human being in the American Constitution. Is that the act of a human being or the act of a devil?
Okay, so I'm gonna stop there. All right. Okay, ladies, thoughts on that, especially the concept of what he was saying as far as ist and the term racist, violinist, pianist. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I still come from the perspective that I see racism systemically, so I I personally have like kind of trained my brain to see it that way. So like I can't necessarily flow with what he's saying, but I get what he's saying, you know, in that context, you know, he would be considered a racist or whatever. But I also think that we spend a little bit too much time like explaining ourselves to white people. I think, you know, for black people, you know, sometimes we have to explain it that way to them too, because we've been so conditioned. But at the same time, I feel like there is no need to try to explain that to white people at all. Because they're going to keep doing what they're doing, regardless of what type of explanations we provide. But I think in terms of like differentiating between racism and prejudice is important, because I think it kind of, for me, it kind of just makes things make more sense. So if you think of racism as a system and you think of prejudice as a feeling or ideas you have about a group of people before you meet them, or automatically, then that makes sense. And I think in that context, Black people can be prejudiced. And I even heard it said this term of healthy prejudice, which I love, because it's like our prejudice is based on what they've done to us for hundreds of years. You know, we're not just saying, oh, white people are this or white people are that for no reason. This is based on historical evidence of what they've done to us over and over and over again. So the conclusions that we're making are based on that. It's not just because we want to make lies about a group of people. These are based on things. And sometimes we need that prejudice in order to protect ourselves. You know, if we think that it's going to be safe to be in certain situations with white people and we're not thinking about what they've done beforehand, we could be putting ourselves in danger. So in some cases we do need it.
So you touched on something, because I was going to get to it later, but I'm going to go ahead. So prejudice, preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. So I don't really believe that we are actually prejudiced, because that would mean that it's not based on reason or actual experience. So I think we can be biased. I think that, yeah, you might be prejudiced against a certain person. So, you know, for example, because your ideas of white people are based on past experiences or ancestral, and then also understand epigenetics play a part too. So that is based on reason. Like, that's a reasonable judgment that you're making. So you're going to have your guard up. Now, that white person can come in there and you can say or do something to that white person and you don't even know that white person. So it's in a preconceived opinion. So you can use it, but again, if it's not based on reason, which is usually what they do to us, it's not based on reason, because historically we know that the white man, along with the white woman, was dangerous to not just to us, but to the world, like to the world. So again, that's why I don't necessarily totally agree with us being prejudiced or bigoted, because it would say that we don't have reason to feel the way that we feel, when just looking at the video that we just looked at, we have every reason to feel that. We have every reason to have our guard up when it comes to white people, you know. So I think that we have to be careful of letting people project things onto us, and then we just say, you know what, you're right, that's what it is. You're right, we are prejudiced, we are bigoted, you know, when it comes down to actually what the words. And then, like you said, Rhonda, before, you said that we're getting a lot of these definitions from white people anyway. So, you know, we're getting these definitions, and then we're attaching ourselves to those definitions. And that can be a whole nother conversation about whether we need to be going based on their definitions or other definitions. That's why I like to look at etymology a lot, so we can actually look at the origin of a word and kind of say, okay, what are we applying to today? Are we applying the origin, the conception of the word, or are we applying what the word has spiraled into? So, Hanifah, your thoughts?
So I agree with, okay, so as you guys was having that dialogue just now, I wrote down, we are traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We're traumatized. And what does that mean? It just means that you're subject to lasting shock. That's it. Genetically passed on. Okay. We don't, you like I was talking on my show before where my mom has a saying. So if certain things we couldn't do growing up, we couldn't walk on our knees in the house, right? We couldn't whistle in the house. There's just like so many different things. But then, you know, as children, you're like, well, why, right? And my mom would say, well, that's what the old people say. And all that means is there's an oral tradition that African people have, right? That stuff is passed on. By the time it get to us, we find ourselves doing things and we don't even know why, right? And when we trace it back, we know that it's connected to something, right? It's the same thing with us as to why we have a distrust for the medical industry, right? In this country, we it's something that's passed on. You might not have all the details unless you go and look for the information, but you know you've been told you stay away from such and such. A medical apartheid, the author talks about that, where there was a certain hospital where they just knew we don't go into the hospital. Why? Because black people go in and they never come out. Okay. So imagine that passed on generation to generation to generation, and no one knows the real story, right? The depth of the story behind it. I feel the same way as far as what we're saying not prejudice, but it's trauma, right? Is I don't really know why this smell triggers this response in me, but it does because there's a story behind the smell, right? I don't understand this energy I'm feeling when I'm around this person, right? You may not understand it, but perhaps that person may have violated you, and your brain just push it back, and you can't remember trauma. That's how trauma works. So it's just this shock that stays in the body, right? To where the mind is still going. And I say this all the time. A lot of us live out of our minds. We are not in our bodies. We are living from our headspace. Okay.
Right.
And I say that because there's so many things that the body holds memory of. Well, we're still going because we're living from here. But then the body doesn't forget. Genetics, when you talk about genetics, these things that are passed down to us. So yes, we could say not prejudice all we want. I'm just going to go ahead and say we're traumatized. We are traumatized people. So there's the work of healing that has to be done on the psyche, on the body, and it has to do with us taking back possession of those parts of ourselves. Why? Because we are under the domination of a people who seeks to control for their own advancement and genetic survival at the end of the day, at the beginning and the end of the day. That is what this is all about.
Right.
So when we were going back, I want to go back a little bit because we were talking about the race. Someone was saying, oh, the racism piece where a lot of black people have a hard time accepting that. No, I'm sorry. You were talking about races, right? The guy was talking about the ist at the end of the word, violinist, right? He was talking about all of that. And I'm just like, as I was listening, I just started thinking like, what is it that he's really communicating, right? And I think I'm more with Rhonda as far as the systemic piece of it. I think we can't lose sight of that because we keep bringing it down to this individual level, right? And we think, and there are black people who think themselves superior to white people, right? Maybe someone can say that technically by definition of the ist, right? Maybe they can say that person is racist. But when you look at it systematically, then you have to say, then they can't really be racist. They can be racist maybe on an interpersonal level, but even then you have to question that. Because if a black person is racist against a black white person, that person hurts them. They are locked up and the key is thrown away. if a white person is racist, most of the time, as we've seen, because of the backing of the system, okay, of that person racist views, oftentimes what happens? They get off. They don't do as much time as perhaps a black person. This is what we mean when we say racism. This is what we're talking about. We have this individual thing of someone say, well, I don't like white people. Oh, you're racist. We're traumatized. We don't trust them. We don't trust them because they have hurt our bloodline. They have injured our bloodline. That's what this is about. We have an injury that we are trying to heal, and we're finding it hard to heal in the same place that we were injured in.
Right.
That's what we're dealing with as black people. Black people are trying to heal in the place that is set out to destroy them, and still is. There are still laws. There are still things in place that work against people like you and I. There are still doors that we are not able to walk into, right? There are still barriers put before us. So this thing, I need us to stop talking about racism as if it's this past thing. It's very present. It's a very now thing. It is not only just happening in the world outside of us. It is happening in our bodies.
Right.
And that's what we are reacting to. So yeah, maybe we could take prejudice off the table, but we are traumatized. And if you are traumatized, and Rhonda could probably speak better to this than I can. When a person is traumatized, there's certain behaviors that they are going to exhibit. Okay? It depends on the level of the trauma, right? And you look and you say, wow, if you look at that behavior outside of the trauma, then you start to label that person and think that person, you start to define the person by the behavior. Because you don't know the context, you don't know the history, you don't know what created the behavior, what the behavior is connected to. And this is why history is important. It's not to bask in victimhood. It's not to be stuck. It's not to say you have this inferior mindset. It's to say my people are struggling. My people are ill. My people are injured. And I want to understand why so that I can push my people forward. We cannot move forward if we do not understand the reason for why we are what we are today. It's impossible. So when we talk about racism, okay, prejudice, but then let's just say it like this, we're traumatized. Now what? What does that look like? What does a traumatized person look like? Okay, the lady that sees the guy who says who raped her, and she sees him years later. I think it was a movie series I was watching. I wish I could remember the name of it. But what happened was the lady was raped years ago. Yes, she was younger. Saw the guy on the beach, right, and stabbed him to death. Now, they couldn't find the connection between her and the guy. She was on the beach with her family, chilling.
Oh, I saw that movie. I saw that movie.
And all of that came back to her, right? And she walked over there and stabbed him to death. Now they had to go in and investigate, right? Now we could decide, they could have decided to say, put her away for life. Now she was a white woman. Put her away for life, you know, she's a murderer. But then to do the investigation, they understood that when she saw that, all of it came back to her and she just acted. I feel like a lot of times that's what we're observing with the condition of our people in this country. That's what we're observing, right? But because we want to dash away history, because we want to act like all those centuries never happened, because we want our people to move forward, we start to label Black people, right? Black people are this. And then we start to actually think it is because we are Black, we are like this. That is white rhetoric. That is you coming to a conclusion without proper context. And proper context is history. You have to place our behavior within the proper historical context. Something gave birth, something created, right? The condition that we found ourselves in today. So you cannot come to talk to me as if this is innate, as if we are born this way. right? As if we just don't like Black people because we are racist. That is intellectually dishonest. And that means that you lack awareness of self and knowledge of self, and you lack knowledge of history. So that's really all I wanted to say to that, because I'm just like, yes, we're traumatized. What does that look like? You know,
Right.
Rhonda could speak to that. What does that look like? That look like how Black people are showing up in this society. And some of us are doing the work, and we are unpacking, and we are healing, and we are taking off the layers piece by piece. But it's not that simple, because racism is not that simple. Right? Because racist ideology is not that simple. Because systems of oppression is not that simple. So for us to think that we just need to just do this and it's going to resolve everything, no, there's a work that has to be done. And it has to start with us acknowledging first our condition and why our condition is, and then go from there to begin the healing. But yeah.
You said
Yes.
said mic drop.
Yes.
So there is a concept of like, if you want to call it prejudice, again, I don't really believe, agree with it, but there are Black people who say because Black people can be prejudiced, that's the same thing. It's kind of like being synonymous with racism. How do you feel about that concept? Because they're saying it's a concept of like it being a sister of racism. I disagree with that, especially if we're talking about the power dynamic, because it's a power move. Like racism is about power, it's about domination. So, even if I am quote unquote prejudiced, I still don't hold any power. And there was a conversation I was listening to, and let's see, what were they talking about? And they were talking about it was a one guy, he was a Black guy, and he was talking about Black people being racist. He believes that Black people can be racist. And then he brought up the concept of being in a power position. So, Black people being in a power position, but mind you, in institutions that are white dominated. But he brought up that, like, if you're an administrator, let's say administrator at a school, and you're holding other groups of people back and you're pushing the Black people forward, that is an example of racism. So, that's still silly to me, because you're talking about one place, and even if other people catch wind of it, it's not going to go very far. Because go ahead.
I'm sorry. That example just like drove me crazy, because I was just thinking about like if you're being like abused in your house, and then you have like one section of the house
right
where you're not subject to that abuse. Now you're the abuser. Like what? Like, and I think that making what you were saying earlier about like prejudice and racism, I think that giving this attribute to Black people, however we see it, whether we see, racism as a feeling, or we see it as an interpersonal thing, or we see it as prejudice, giving that attribute to Black people, I think just keeps white people off the hook. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's dangerous about it, is that this system of racism, white supremacy, the system of oppression will continue to thrive because we think it's something that anybody can do just by saying a word or doing an action that really has no significant impact. And I think that's why it's so problematic for us to continue to see it that way. We really have to see these as two completely different things, because and the thing is, this is ingrained into us from such a young age, because as you were talking about prejudice, my brain went back to elementary school. That's where I was introduced to those terms. Yep. Prejudice and racism. Yep. And so it was taught in that way. And we even did like an experiment in class where, like, they divided people into sections, like this color and that color. They didn't use black and white, of course, but it was like, okay, this is what racism is. That was their way of teaching us what racism is treating people differently based on a color. And because of that, again, it makes it seem like it's something that anybody can do. It takes white people off the hook because it's like, hey, we're not the only ones doing it. And again, it ignores the structural violence. As Sister Hanifah says, it ignores the fact that it's global. It ignores the fact that it's impacting us in multiple ways, psychologically, spiritually, health-wise, like just in so many different ways on a daily basis. And a lot of us, we are literally dying from this. And so when we again give these euphemisms or again equate prejudice with racism, then it just takes them off the hook, and it keeps us from doing what's necessary in order to eradicate it or get away from it.
Great point.
Racism. This is the thing. Okay. Racism is using everything at your disposal to maintain power and control. That does not define Black people as a collective. It never, it doesn't define us it just does not. Okay. Racism is using psychology, right, as a weapon, as a way to advance your kind. Okay. Racism in psychology says because these people don't think the way we think, then therefore they are inferior. Okay. That's psychology. Biology, because these people have bigger buttocks, right? Broader hips, bigger breasts, right? That means that they are promiscuous. That means that they are lustful. That means that they are hypersexual. Do we not realize that we are still dealing with that today?
Right.
That is racism in biology. Racism in neuroscience looks like what? Because their brains are a little smaller, maybe the way shaped, that means that they are dumber. They are less intelligent. Okay? Neuroscience. That is racism, using everything at its disposal. Okay? Racism, religion says Black people have no soul. That is racism, using religion, right, to subjugate a people. That is racism. We can never define ourselves like that. We are not using psychology. We are not using biology. We are not using religion. We are not using education. We are not using all of the sciences that you can think of to oppress another people because we don't have the power dynamic to do so. What are we really talking about? Saying Black people cannot be racist is not us trying to get off the hook for bad behavior, right? It is not us trying to get off the hook because we just want to treat white people badly, right? It is more to the reason why you struggle with the idea that Black people can't be racist is because you do not understand racism in its full capacity. That's what it boils down to at the end of the day. Either you don't accept it or you don't understand it. So when people define it for you, you either are dealing with some dissonance and you're having a hard time accepting it. Okay? Or you just want to stand, you want to be stubborn. No, Black people can be racist. I just went down all the different ways that racism shows up. Neely Fuller talks about it, the 9 areas of human activity. He goes over all of them: economics, politics, religion, education, law. I mean, we can go down all of them. He lists 9 of them. That is what racism looks like. It is a whole system that's backing it. And we're still trying to determine if Black people can be racist or not. Then we have to go back to what racism is if we are struggling with that. We have to go back to what racism means. What does that look like? That's where we have to go back. We have to start there and then come forward. And I can guarantee you, you will never come to the conclusion that Black people are racist within this society or even globally, because racism, again, is a global phenomena. That is what we are talking about. These people have used everything at their disposal also to be racist. Everything to make sure that they cover all their bases. Everything. You can think about anything, everything. I'm into understanding what will you call it? Diagnosis, certain diagnosis, ADHD. Look at how they diagnose our children at what percentage, so much higher in comparison, right? Yeah. Look at the suspension rate of Black boys. I mean, we can go on and on. This is a system that we are dealing with. But here's the last thing I'm going to say. The reason why we struggle oftentimes with this is because we talk about the system without, but we don't really talk about the system within. The system doesn't just exist outside of us. We are born in it, and it is born in us. It is when we come into this world, forget coming into the world. When we are in the womb, we are exposed to racism, whether we realize it or not. Why? Because it is a system that we are all existing in. Whether we are complicit or fighting it, we are existing in it. So a child, before they even come out of the womb, is already becoming a part of that system. So when you enter into this world, this system isn't just outside of you, it's also within you. And that's where a lot of people are having an issue, because we are trying to dismantle the system without, on the outside of us, without first tackling and dismantling the system of racism within us.
That right there. I wish I could put that on a broadcast, like just a big billboard for everybody to see. That I think that's one of the most important things. And that's also in our ancient teachings, as above, so below, as outside, so within. Right. Whatever is outside of us is going to be within us in some ways as well. And I think because so many people miss that even those who really want to achieve Black liberation, who really want to see Black people free, still do things that are oppressive to other Black people or oppressive to themselves. And it's so easy to be led to self-destruction in this society because of what's been ingrained in us. That is the key. Once we learn that so much of this is internal, and as you were saying earlier, the layers, because just because you figured out what racism really is, or just you figured out how white people really are, that doesn't mean you're still not carrying some of that internalized oppression. I found that out the hard way. I'm thinking I'm woke, I'm super Black power, and then I realized I still had some of that inferiority in me. So you have to keep peeling back those layers. It's an everyday process. And in terms of our healing, as Sister Hanifah was speaking about earlier so eloquently, that healing process is so important, because the level of trauma that we've been through, I can't even speak on. There are books, and even those books are just scratching the surface of the level of trauma that we've been through collectively, generationally, and historically as a people. And so we have to heal. And what's happening right now in these conversations that we were talking about is people are trying to dismiss what has happened and still heal. And, anybody who has gone through a healing process, that's the first step, is awareness. You have to be aware of what happened to you. You have to acknowledge it in order to heal from it. But some of us are trying to just leave it in the past or forget about it and then go forward. It don't work like that. It's going to show up. And it may not show up in the way you think it's going to show up, but it's going to show up. And again, anybody who has done that individual healing work knows how this happens and how this shows up in your life if you don't do that work. And so we seriously have to do the work. And I think that's, a lot of that is individual, but I think it's also a collective process. And it's so important, because when we're talking about eradicating racism, we have to eradicate it internally in order to get away from it. And that is a healing process. And that's how we get closer to even, seeing the light of day out of this.
Yes. That is why you say you have to constantly be aware. You have to check yourself, like on a daily basis, even how we react to one another, how we engage in our different relationships, or just people that we see in the store. Like, it's just a constant effort of unlayering those filters. I have to check myself constantly because I'm just like, is this me Or is this the filter that I've been given? I mean, it's constant too, because just like when Hanifah spoke on trauma, we have to understand that there has not been a time since we've been here on this soil that we have not been traumatized. We are constantly being traumatized every day. Trauma on top of trauma on top of trauma. So, you know, that's why I say, and Rhonda, you made a good point of how we need to stop having these conversations with white people and trying to get them to understand. I'm just talking, I'm just be real. I'm talking to my people. That's who I'm talking to. I have had conversations, you know, the old me when I was new in my walk. I would have countless conversations with white folks. But I got to a point where they're not going to ever understand. They're not going to understand these Black bodies that we're in, and they have that privilege. And are they going to give away their privilege? Do we really think that they're going to give away their privilege? So the thing is it's not about them. Even the whole concept of us, of people hating white people, that is still you giving your energy over to them. And so understanding that it's not, I told Hanifah this, I was just like, you know, it's not even about them to me. It's like they're not even in my thought process when it comes to when it comes to, like, they're a non-factor for me. So you can take that as you will, but it's more of loving my people more than my dislike, or if you want to call it, well, dislike, I'll say dislike, because I don't hate anyone. I don't give anybody that power over me to hate them. But it's more of loving us more than our dislike or whatever they have going on. So that's very important, I think, for us to get, because the way that we push forward is by loving each other. Like, that's how we push forward and make this thing work, is by loving one another.
I think what you just spoke to, actually, I thought that like initially with the David Banner thing, when I first heard like but Black people should be racist, right away, what my first reaction to it was hell no, right? Because for me, for us to become racist is for us to despiritualize ourselves, and we are spiritual people, right? Like, that's how I see that. So when he said that, I'm like, that requires me to practice a level of hate that goes beyond my natural self. You know what I mean? And so my first reaction was no, you know, because I don't believe that I don't believe in becoming what you hate to fight what you hate. You know, I don't believe in becoming your enemy to fight or defeat your enemy. I just don't believe in that, because we cannot say that these are some of the most diabolical creatures to ever walk the place of the earth, and then think we also have to become them to defeat them. What happens to us? So I think to become racist and hateful in that capacity is for us to despiritualize ourselves as a people. And I think that a lot of our power exists within the spiritual aspect of us, right?
Yeah,
Our connection to that realm. And to become racist and hateful is to disconnect ourselves from our power, right? To become racist, which is hateful to me, is to say that I no longer I'm no longer connected to that other realm, or that realm that feeds me the power that I need to go forward. So when I first heard it, that's what my initial reaction was. I was like, no, you are asking us to despiritualize ourselves, right? Because now when you say what Black people need to be racist, I felt like he was discussing racism on a very surface level, right? And so people that's listening is like, oh, you know, the way he broke it down, yeah. And I'm like, hell no. Like, when you understand racism for what it is, I say absolutely not. We do not need to become racist to advance and progress ourselves. We actually need to be in love with ourselves in order to advance ourselves. And then the last thing I wanted to say, Rhonda was speaking to, like, the whiteness that sometimes is in all of us. You know, we've talked about that and being able to see it and be like, oh, damn, I need to deal with that, right? So, you know, the cartoons where they have the little things that I guess that's supposed to be their conscience, the devil, and then the good one. Those people are white for a lot of us. They're white people. So I'm gonna connect it for recently. I just had a conversation, and one of the things that I realized that's happening in the conversation that we're not pointing out is how many people felt a way about what happened between Chris and Will on the stage of the Oscars. Had a lot to do with this is happening in the company of white people.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to do that. You know? So the voices that we have, good, evil, are white voices oftentimes. You know, we constantly got, okay, well, I gotta check myself. I gotta check my blackness. You know, I can't be too black, you know. I can't have access to the full range of my emotions in fear of being labeled angry or in fear of being labeled aggressive, right? I can't have full access to my humanity, right? Not in white spaces because it's not safe to do so, right? And we are eager to please white people. You know, there's this thing of people pleasers. A lot of black people are white people pleasers.
Yes.
So the conversation, even with the Will Smith thing that happened with the punch, and I'm not even getting deep into that. But one of the things that we refuse to acknowledge is how so many people are offended by it because it happened in a white space. Because the Oscars is technically a white space,
right?
So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. Yeah.
And you can go ahead and put the StreamYard in the chat, and anybody who wants to come up, you can come up as we kind of start winding down the conversation. But that what you said about the spiritual aspects, that's very important, how we receive our power from that and not our power from being like them. So when we talk about a lot of the revolts that happen, that was us tapping into our spirituality. So, you know, the whole concept of being a Ogun or even like a Sekhmet, right? Like that is tapping into our spiritual, and it's not going to always be pretty, but it's still tapping into that power that we have. We don't become like them. We become like those energies that are needed in that moment in order to get our freedom. So that is very important that you pointed out, because that's what we need to be striving to receive our power from those spiritual, the spiritual, and that those are just those spiritual concepts manifesting within us. You know, we don't even have to call it that. That's just us tapping into who we already are. So very important. I'm gonna touch on some of the comments. I'm not gonna get to I see y'all been chatting it up, so I'm not gonna be able to get into all the chats, but I just want to touch on some. So Dante said, Black people must come to the realization that we have to be involved in our own rescue.
Yes,
absolutely. Okay, so participation and rejection becomes a catch-22, which was just stated. What does one do since we are mostly in survival mode? So Mike Sullivan, speaking on Dr. Umar's comment, he was speaking on the Black masses because unfortunately the masses aren't awakened or conscious. That's true. Very true. I think that even when we talk about different movements that we have, that's still like, we want a seat at your table. We're not trying to create our own table. We just want a seat at yours. So that's kind of what I think he's talking about too, because these people who are kind of the ones who are being pushed forward that we see, like even in like the Black Lives Matter movements and stuff like that, we are seeing people who are not necessarily quote unquote conscious. They're just politically involved, and so they're still comfortable trying to make themselves comfortable in an oppressive state. Let's see. Trash Can Wave, salute to you, sir. Let's see. I will pick them up because let's see who else we got here. Okay, so he said they were Africa and think we Somalis in their minimum wage nursing home slaves with their xenophobic immigration policy. Okay, I think that was pertaining to something else. Never forget how they cut Africa up into cake slides in Berlin without a single African in that room. I am prejudiced of East Europeans and Ukrainians. They are the lowest ranking Caucasian hierarchy, so they are extra anti-Black and neo-Nazi to prove their worth compared to a Danish Caucasian. Interesting. So anybody who wants to come up and have the conversation. I have a few more things to touch on. Okay.
Even the Berlin thing that he just mentioned is a testament to these people's hubris. Okay, it's a testament to their arrogance. It's a testament to their level of thinking they're superior, right? That you can actually take and divide up and create borders and lands of people without their input, right? Without a conversation. That's the level of hubris, the level of arrogance that it lets you know exactly what we're dealing with, right? That's a superiority complex. That's what that is. I don't have to consult with you about anything. If I want to knock the walls down in your house, I can do so. If I want to build an extra room, attach it to your house and have my children live in it, I can do so. I don't need to talk to you about anything, even though you've lived in this house for years upon years. I can come in, right? Because I have 4 houses to your one. I can come in and I can say, this is now my house. You can live here. Perhaps you should take the garage. You know what? No, not the garage. Take the attic. Because this is my house now. That's what we're dealing with. That's a superiority complex. And this is their history, by the way. This is their history. This is what was done to the natives, right? The native, if you want to call them Amerindians, whatever we want to call them, this is what was done. This is what Thanksgiving is all about, right? This is what was done to people. And it wasn't just Black people. So to that I say when someone, you know the saying, when someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Believe them. Yeah.
Okay. What's his name? Amos Wilson says, you will not find the psychology of these people in their psychology book. You will find their psychology in their history books. That is where you will find the psychology of these people.
Absolutely.
So I'm just looking through these comments. You're saying some interesting things here. I will give evil eyes when I see Black guys with white girlfriends in public, so he know I disapprove. Only salute Black couples because all odds against Black love in white matrix. So that's a conversation we'll have. We'll have that one day. Let's see. Anything else here? Okay, so Inya said, how can we fight the white supremacy in us while being in the system of it? Is it possible to separate the two? So we have, to me, my thought process on that is that we do have to do that right. We have to consciously and attentively be doing that while we're still in the system, because we are still engaging in their system until and build while we're in the system so that eventually we can have a system of our own. And I say this all the time, that it may not happen in our lifetime. You know, it's more of it happening for the next generations, but we may not see it, but we are planting the seeds. We are kind of putting down the, doing some of the first, the first steps. They talked about in Kemet, aka Egypt, that that the person who would actually put the assignment for the pyramids to be built would not necessarily see the pyramid being built. It would be the generations after that would see the actual finished product of the pyramid. So we have to be in essence, we have to be intentional about being builders and understanding that we may not see that in our generation. So I think that, dealing with white supremacy is a must if we are really thinking towards the future. And there's other things that I can say to that, but
Can I speak to that?
yes, go ahead.
Unplugging is one. I'm about to do a whole spring detox, and let me tell you what I went through, right? Because I just started the YouTube thing, right? And then I'm on social media, and I'm kind of like slowly because I know that I'm about to do a whole spring detox, social media detox or whatever. But even the idea of turning it off, I literally have to deal with all the what ifs and buts that arises within me, right? Of just saying log out and stay log out for this amount of time, the wrestling, right? And the conflict and the drama that is that awakens in me is amazing. But we have to understand that one of the weapons or one of the tools, actually one of the biggest tools of white supremacy, is white domination, is media. Is media.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
on Instagram, it's social media, it's in this space. Your algorithm is in cahoots with racism. Okay. Yeah. The AIs are racist, okay?
Yes.
Just let y'all know. But I'm just saying that one of the ways to answer that is to decide to unplug. And the reason why I say that is pay attention to when you unplug. And I mean unplug. You are not checking your social media. You're not updating. I mean unplug. Pay attention to the withdrawal that happens. Pay attention to how your thinking begins to shift. Pay attention to how your time is then managed, right? Pay attention to how much time you realize you've been wasting in these spaces, right? Journal it if you have to. Okay, pay attention to how the clarity of your thinking, how clear your thinking becomes. So that's one way to do that, is to unplug, right? People who don't have televisions in their homes and all of these things, people who are living off the grid are not dealing with a lot of what we are dealing with, because
Right.
we are constantly consuming the messages, right, of racist ideologies. We
Yes.
are constantly consuming them. So one way to do that is to unplug, even if it's just twice a year. Just unplug. You don't have to detox. There are different kinds of detox, but one way you can detox is from media. And I can tell you right now, the minute you do that, you are going to begin to actually experience actual physical and psychological changes within your body if you're paying attention. So that's just one way to start. And then find pockets of people, like-minded people who are about the healing, and connect with them, congregate with them, converse with them, fellowship with them, right? Get with them. Okay. This is on top of unplugging. Connect, because these spaces will make us actually begin to paint a picture of the world that is not true. Okay. So it's best to get out there and connect with real people when you unplug as well. That's important as well. So that's just one way towards healing. I say if you're gonna heal, you're gonna have to unplug from all of it as
And
much as you possibly can.
how amazingly, what is the word? I'll use the word because he used it in the clip, devilish they are. There was a documentary on Netflix, and I can't remember that documentary's name for the life of me, but it was talking about how they know there was kind of like software engineers who were actually like telling their secrets. And but they were saying how they were talking to, I forgot who they were talking to, but they were talking to them and saying like, this is not right, this is wrong, like we are literally controlling people's actions, we're literally controlling how people think. So it's so crazy because they have every millisecond of what you do online. It's recorded constantly. And so what happens is, even if you stay on something for like 5 seconds, what happens? Your algorithm thinks that you liked that picture or whatever, that advertisement so much. So what are they going to do? They're going to keep showing it to you. So that's what they're doing. Even when you look at it, because you know how YouTube is so crazy now, like you just be flipping, you don't even want to look at it, but it starts playing for you even when you don't even want to when you're not even interested in the video. That's why I'm constantly like, not interested, not interested. Don't recommend channel. Because if you even stop on it for a second or for a few seconds, what's this going to do? It's going to start giving you those same type of videos. So it's very important that we even understand whether it's ads, whether we're on Google, whether we're on Facebook, Instagram, whatever internet you are on. If you stop and you look at whatever it is, it's being recorded and they're thinking that's what you want. And so they're going to start advertising whatever it is to you. So that's, it's crazy. And they know like that we're addicted. They know it. Whether you want to say it's unethical or not, which I do think is unethical, but they're going to continuously push it. And now look what they're doing. They're creating a whole metaverse. So, so go deeper into the matrix now. But so touching on a few of these comments here, let's see.
And I just want to say racism will be waiting for you in the metaverse as well. That's all.
Exactly. Peace, Tiffany. Thank you for coming through. Okay, so I'm gonna just touch on a few things before we end, because I want to get back to this whole doctrine, because when we talk about like doctrine of white supremacy, doctrine of racism, so that whole idea. So when we think of these doctrines, there are doctrines within that. When I think of doctrine of racism, let's just go there. I want to I think of a belief, because a doctrine is a belief or set of beliefs that held and taught by a church, political party, or other group. So when I think of doctrine, I think about, within religion. So for example, Christianity, there are different kind of doctrines depending on what church you go to. And so even with political groups, they have different doctrines. So to me, a doctrine should align or is in alignment with what you feel is best for yourself, your family, and community, or what you have been brought up to believe. We can also use creed. That's kind of a safer word to use, because a lot of times when we hear doctrine, that has been stigmatized through religion. And so could we, based on what David Banner was saying, could we create a doctrine? And I'm not saying that I agree with this, but could we create a doctrine of racism that aligns with what we're trying to do as a community? So their doctrine, for example, does not have to, like, that doesn't have to be our doctrine. Or since we exist in this society, do we have to go by their doctrine of racism?
Yeah, I still wouldn't call it racism, but I think of something like a race first mentality that many of our leaders are pushing forth. And there's the Race First rally in August every year now. Things like that I think are helpful. Things that promote us towards self-love and centering ourselves. Those type of ideologies. I still wouldn't call it racism, but I think we definitely need doctrines and principles and values that orient us towards moving towards freedom, because a lot of us are very scattered. We've come across different information. We've all been exposed to different things. We all woke up differently. we've had different life experiences, we've had different traumas, and so getting out of this, I think, requires us to have some agreement in terms of how we're going to get out of it. And I think that's something that we're missing now, because I don't even think we agree on that in terms of how to get out. You know, you ask one Black person, they're going to have one answer. You ask another Black person, they're going to have another answer. So I do think that's important.
And that's a good, because I've had this conversation a couple times, as far as if we are to progress in this thing, do we need to have unification of mind, body, and spirit? So basically, do we need to have a set of beliefs that we're all unified on, as far as even spiritual beliefs? Because I think the most common disagreements that we do have is within our spiritual belief systems. So a lot of times I had a conversation, we had a spiritual conversation on this channel. And one thing that was very apparent was that it's hard for us to come to a consensus because of our different spiritual belief systems. And I think, I had this conversation the other day. I was like, I can kind of, I think I can work with people regardless of their spiritual system. But I think what happens is when people are really religious, they have a hard time separating from that, and they kind of want to push their beliefs. Like, you don't believe as I do, so we have to, and that can even be in the conscious community, because people in the conscious community, quote unquote conscious community, they can do that thing too, even like with the whole concept of how we eat. Vegan is like, you have to be alkaline. Like, if you don't go by Dr. Sebi's alkaline list, then you're not really trying to be healthy. So it's like all of those different things that we're having a hard time unifying, because we have all of these different ideas. So what do y'all think about that when we talk about creating our own doctrine? Within our own doctrine, especially if we say we're going to start small, because I believe we have to start small before we go like to the rest of the community. But within that, do you think that we have to start with people who are mostly aligned as far as like spirituality, beliefs, what we feel? Because even like with the concept of racism, like if you have Black people who believe that you're a racist, because like I said, Hanifah said I didn't have to say all that, but like I said, I've been called racist like in these YouTube streets, right? So can I align with Black people who think I'm right? Like, can I build with Black people who think that what I'm saying and what I'm doing is racist? Like it's such an okay, so just based off what I just said, what do y'all feel about that, about unifying?
I definitely think there has to be a common goal. However, I feel like we have to allow for diversity. I think somehow we got this ideology that, you have to be all 20, 30, 40, I don't know how many things, in order to be considered conscious. And that's just not practical. There's no conscious person that completely has my same ideologies and beliefs and ways of doing things. Exactly. And I'm grateful for that, because our diversity is what makes us who we are, and we all have different roles to play. We're not all going to be doing the same thing. So I think that we have to be united on a common goal. And there's unfortunately a lot of Black people who are not aligned with that. They don't want freedom. We're not going to be able to do anything with people who don't want to be free from the system. So, but I think within those who do, we do need to develop some goals, some principles, some values, but not to be so strict on you have to do X, Y, and Z in order to fight for this. And one thing I think about a lot when people kind of bring religion into the context, I think about if Marcus Garvey was in a room with Malcolm X and Baba Baruti and Baba Imhotep, I think they will all agree on the same thing. I think they would say, yeah, we, I think, in a matter of minutes, they would probably come to the same conclusion. And they have different religious beliefs. From my understanding, Marcus Garvey was a Christian. Malcolm X obviously was a Muslim. And, Baba Baruti and others are African-centered. So and they practice African spirituality. So I think that there's a way that if we really care enough about the goal, that we can still, not be so focused on those things that separate us as a people.
That's a good point, Rhonda, that you made about Gavi. And I think the difference in Gavi and the likes of him is that they were raised first.
Yes.
And a lot of people who are religious in this country, they would tell you they're Christian first, or they're this first. I think that's the differentiation, is that these people, these brothers were raised first. That religion piece was secondary, and they probably, some of them probably inherited it as well. So it's like, I'm just going to do what I know, right? I'm going to go to church because that's what I know to do. But they were definitely raised first people, and I think that matters a whole lot. So even though Malcolm X was a Muslim, right? These were people who were race first people. Their concern was to Black people. So that is what they could come together on. They will be able to come and get together on the race first concept. Do you see what I'm saying? Religion is secondary, but in order for us to do that, people have to first understand that. Garvey understood that, right? So he can be a Christian and work with other people who they believe in race first, right? So it's like, okay, I'm a Christian, yeah, all of that, but I'm race first. And that is where we come together and align and build upon. That is the foundation that we're building on, nothing else. All of that stuff is secondary. So that means that when you go to your mosque and I go to my temple, right? And you go to your church, right? We go and we do what we got to do. We give honor, respect to whoever our gods, our deities are. And then when we come back together, we're coming back together on the basis of what? Race first. That's it. That's it. And I think the struggle is a lot of us have a difficult time doing that because we are identifying with our religion first above all else.
Yeah.
And then lastly, to what I ask about doing our own thing or creating our own thing, I will go ahead and say that, how about us deciding, because there are a lot of things out there that's already there for us to build on. Maybe deciding on what that thing is. We can start on the basis of ma'at. We can start right there.
Yes.
Okay? We can start right there where you judge yourself every single day. I have not. Very basic. We could start there. And that alone would put us in a place where we have to treat each other with love and with respect and mutuality, right? With mutual respect and care about each other. Because the basis or the foundation that we are building on is just a simple system of ma'at. That's it. We could start there. I'm just giving one example. But there are these things that already exist. It's a matter of having us say, and here's, I'm going to say this last thing. I was a Christian. I think everybody on this panel was. I want to say that my aunt probably was the most committed Christian amongst all of us.
Wait a minute. Why are you saying that? I need to know why you saying that.
I'm gonna go ahead and say my aunt went hard for Jesus. Okay, she went hard for Jesus. She went harder than any of us on this spot. I'm just gonna go ahead and say that. But I wanted to say that it's very hard to completely embrace the Christian doctrine and also embrace things like ma'at and so forth, because you've been taught that those things are demonic.
I was just about to bring that up because we can
say
ma'at
it's very difficult.
Long, but yeah.
It's very difficult, and I say that as someone who once was a Christian, and you couldn't come to me with that stuff. An altar? Yep. What are you talking about? What altar? Yep. The only altar I'm going for is for somebody to come lay hands on me and I could catch the Holy Ghost or something. That's the only altar I know about. What you talking about, ancestors? Oh, wait, we worshiping the ancestors? Like, I know where my mind was at as a Christian. So a lot of our brothers and sisters, their minds are still there. So it makes it very difficult to do so. However, I do not know how they cannot see there's sweet old Moses in the laws of Ma'at.
Mm.
I can't understand how they can't see that came from Ma'at, right? I can't understand how they don't understand that Moses could be raised by this Pharaoh for all his life and not be acquainted with that system that we're talking about, right? To the point now, here it is in the Bible, condensed into 10 commandments. And it's the same thing. But what happens is we get so locked in and so narrow-minded, and it's like, no, I can't. If I do so, I'm selling out my Christian faith. That's a difficult task. But it can be done because, like you said, Garvey and so forth showed us that it can be done. But in order for it to be done, that person has to be raised first. They have to be.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we got to understand that whole idea of why you can accept things like ma'at or whatever is because of the fact that you still have that white filter.
Mm-hmm.
That white filter is still on, and that is why you are still not able to accept these things that are purely a part of you. They are a part of you. They are within you. And it's kind of, to me, it's silly in a sense, because when you think about things, the whole concept of, because you don't have to call it ma'at, right? You don't have to call it. You could just say, I'm going to wake up every day. I'm going to judge myself. Because ma'at is, it's not an English word anyway. Most of the things that you get from your Bible were not even in English, but that because we have that white filter and we were introduced to that. Most of us, with I think the exception of, I know Hanifah wasn't, but most of us came out the womb being brought into a specific religion, whatever it may be. And so it's hard to detach ourselves from that, because that is what we were brought into. And so if I say that what I was doing was wrong, then I have to say that my mother was wrong, my grandmother was wrong, my great grandmother was wrong. We have to go, and we don't want to say that, we don't want to.
That's a good point, Ma'at.
Right.
Yeah,
So
we don't want to go to hell.
Right. And that, fear, that's a big one. Fear is a big one.
At the beginning and the end of the day, nobody want to be Hades. Yeah. That is it. We do not want to be there.
Not realizing we already there, but anyway.
That's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, so that's kind of the issue. And Hanifah, you said it very well, because we're not raised first. So that is something we have to, I guess we're going to have to teach. We're going to have a town hall on that, where we are practicing what that really means to be raised first. And so that is another conversation we must have as well, because we don't even know what that looks like. We don't know what race first looks like, because we have been so busy practicing someone else's, we're practicing their race first. In actuality, we are practicing them. We're giving into their, and what is the word you're looking for? Like, we're supporting their group. It's everybody knows, if you've been here, I'm from Louisiana, and so I remember, I can't remember exactly verbatim what the bumper sticker said, but I remember driving, and she had a Trump bumper sticker, of course, in Louisiana, right? And then the other bumper sticker said, I vote, because it was like something about my grandchildren. I vote to help my grandchildren, or something. It was something like that. I can't even remember. But what I gathered from when I saw it, I remember thinking, like, that is what they think about. They look in the mirror and they understand the assignment. They understand that whatever they do is for the continuation of themselves. And we have to start understanding whatever we do in this, as a group, is for the continuation. It's very silly for me to look at myself, look at my husband, look at my children who are all Black or brown or whatever you want to call us, brown skin, but me then go and help another group of people become successful. Like it's a very silly concept, and we do that every day. And so
I never thought of race first in the way you just said it. Like you just pretty much, I wrote down perpetuating and practicing their version of race first. How many of us are doing that, right? We're helping to build, we're mules. We're mules. We're used as, we're utilities, right? To perpetuate and to advance their idea of race first, right? Yeah, and not our own. I never even looked at it that way, until you just said it. I'm like, that's true, because they do live by that ideology as well. Very interesting. We talk about race first as Black people, right? But it's like, yeah, they live by that too, and we are either participating in it, and being complicit in it is participating.
Yeah.
Right? Being complicit in it is advancing it, is perpetuating it, all of that. So you could say, well, no, I don't. And yes, you do. The only way for us, yeah. So there we go. We answering our own question. So our way to fight against that is not to perpetuate their version of it, but to advance our version of race first.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Rhonda.
No, I was just going to say, I just love the analogy of our situation as one of a domestic violence situation, because it just makes sense in my head when I think about it that way. And I think about, the same way to get out of a domestic violence situation is not to become the abuser and try to abuse them back, because it's just going to become this back and forth.
Yeah,
but you start prioritizing your own needs, right? You start prioritizing your own needs and stop caring so much about them and start caring about yourself. And then in that case where you do care about yourself and you do care about your well-being and you care about your life survival, then you will do whatever it takes to get out.
Great point. Yeah.
Let's build on that for 1 second. Let's build on that, Rhonda and my aunt. The DV situation, because I do think that Black people, specifically in America, is in DV relationship with America. And you just said, how do you get out of that? And like for me, I tell people all the time, you don't leave prematurely, or else you're gonna find yourself right back there.
Yeah.
Prematurely would mean that if you are dependent on the abuser for your food, for your clothes, for your shelter, right? And you don't have anything to replace that, you're going to find yourself right back with the abuser. It's no different for Black people in America, Black people under the system of racism. It's no different. What is the alternative? What if you, and this is what Rhonda spoke to earlier, we struggle with reimagining certain things because we are thinking and seeing through the lens of whiteness, right? So whiteness puts a cap on how far we can go, which means if you are thinking and processing information through the filter of whiteness, right? Whiteness only allows you as a Black person to think so far, to see so far, right? Because whiteness is about domination and control. So when you talk about the DV situation, is you literally have to see yourself living a free and full and fulfilled life outside of that relationship. You have to be able to see that first before you can actually leave the relationship. Because if you can't see it, you can't leave. If you can't see yourself living outside of the relationship, you're not going to leave. And I think that's a big part of it, the imagination. We talk about enslavement. Enslavement is multi-layered too. Our imaginations is under slavery as well. Our imaginations have been enslaved as well to the point that we can't think outside of a certain box of whiteness. So when we talk about capacity in our thinking, in our psychology, the capacity is what whiteness says it is. Ma'at, you can only think as far as I say you can think. And if you can only think as far as I say you could think, you can only go as far as I say you can go.
Right.
So in connection with the DV situation, it starts with you have to be able to imagine or reimagine yourself outside of the abusive relationship in order to find the faith within yourself and the courage to leave it. But if you can't imagine your life without that abusive partner, you're not going anywhere. Secondly, providing alternatives. Okay, if I leave here, that means I might actually have to go and earn my own. That means I might have to go and plant my own food. I might have to be able to feed myself. I might have to be able to educate my own children. Okay, so that it even goes back to the domestic violence, the DV situation where the person is the victim. They have to be able to say, how do I earn income on my own to support myself? Forget income. How do I support myself? It's the same thing in the relationship with us and this racist system. How do I feed myself? How do I educate my own children? How do I clothe myself? You have to stop putting those things in place before you leave. Because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. And I'm going to get biblical on you here. When the people of Israel went out into the wilderness with Moses, okay, they were like, you know what, Mo. We at least had breakfast when we woke up.
Right. We at least was eating slop.
We were at least eating Mo, I love you, Mo, but nah, this ain't it. Okay, we eating manna every day. I'm tired of manna. You know, I get it. It was like a miracle. It came from the sky and stuff, but I'm tired of it. At least in Egypt, we had a variety. You know, we had lentils, we had black beans, we had, you know, yeah, we were slaves, but we had variety, right? So if you are not prepared, that is what happens. You get out there and fear and doubt overtakes you. And now you want to go back because you then say, at least I was clothed. Yes, I had a black eye every other day, but at least I had a roof over my head. Yes, I had a broken rib, right? But at least I had clothes and I was given a credit card to go shopping. That's DV situations. So you have to be able to create the things that are going to replace what you currently have. And I think Black people need to focus a lot more on that. And you can do that on small levels in your family, right? By just saying, I'm going to figure out a way to feed my own family, planting food, working for yourself. This is what it means to start to unplug in small ways. It don't have to be any grand thing. You have to build up to it. So yeah, I wanted to build on the DV piece because that's a real analogy. We are in a DV when you look at it. And what would you advise people who are in that? I tell them all the time, you don't leave until you are ready. And what does ready look like? That means that you are now able to do what was done for you for yourself.
Very good.
Well said.
It was something that you said that I was going to touch on. I think I lost my thought, but yeah, it goes to the whole idea, because I think even when we look at, you know, the whole push for people to become entrepreneurs and things like that, and the whole idea of chasing the bag, it's still in order to operate within this capitalistic society. So as opposed to saying, I'm doing this so that I can just be able to replace this system, and then my children don't even have to function in that system anymore. You know, when you start homeschooling your kids, especially before the pre-pandemic, there was a lot of questions like, well, you know, are they going to be able to get jobs? Are they going to be able to go to college? And all these different kind of things. Not saying anything is wrong with that, but the whole idea of even homeschooling your children is that they have the option to do what they choose to do and not to be functioning in the society if they choose not to function in that society. So a lot of times you hear that when it comes to entrepreneurship or homeschooling, it's more of like, oh well, if you homeschool your child, then they're not going to be able to keep up with the other people in this society. But we have to understand even the purpose of school anyway, like understanding what that institution is for. And when we understand that, do we really, oh, I don't want to touch on anybody's toes.
No, you're my you could speak, because I'm telling you right now, you know, I'm a new homeschooler. So I'm telling you the process of like dealing with how we have allowed education to be defined for us is just something that you like, you know, we just talked about this stuff that we have to deal with within ourselves. I'm coming up against someone else's definition of education or being educated. And then after that, you what you touched on, you're also bucking up against someone else's definition of success and what that looks like. So this is a lot of stuff that we have to undo within ourselves, right? Also thinking that children cannot be intelligent outside of the confines of the school system. Right? Because how do they know they're intelligent if they're not graded? Oh God, don't get me started. If there's no grading system, how do you determine if the child is, it's so much, but just, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I yeah, you can do.
Yeah, I mean that's a whole. That's the, you know, we kind of, you're giving me some more content here. But yeah, so that is an important, I think, in the context of what that whole idea of domestic violence, because you know I've heard women say that I can't leave. You know, yeah, he's abusing me, but I can't leave because he takes care of all the bills, you know? So we are very much in a domestic violence situation. And then on top of that, we're constantly being traumatized. And, you know, it's so much that is happening. And we, you know, we have a hard time really wanting to address this situation. So what we do, like we talked about earlier, we just become comfortable in our oppression. And that is not even, you know, I don't find that to be comfortable. I find that that's just discomfort, and we're acting like it's comfortable. So continuously having to depend on an institution that was never meant for you and that is oppressing you, is that really comfort? You know, so we have to start really identifying what it means, like we said, like what freedom means. How do we achieve freedom? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Because there are some people who are living off the grid. You might look at that as being uncomfortable, but they're looking like that as it's comfortable for them, because I don't have to adhere to anybody's rules. I don't have to, I can feed myself. I don't have to be a part of this capitalistic society. Nobody's about to be coming knocking on my door telling me I have to do this or whatever. You know, all these different things, because we have to even understand the things that we are complicit with. The whole idea of they really making us pay for water. Like, that's just so simple. They're making us pay for water, you know? So it's so all of these things. Now they have all these springs. You just, I know they said back in the day, you could go to a spring and you could just go get water, but now they're controlling the springs, you know? So they're also controlling our access, not only to economics, but they're also controlling our access to being healthy. Why? Because what does that feed into? That feeds into the medical systems. So it's a lot of different layers to these things that we're being complicit in. Like, understanding that as long as we continue to put toxins in our body, we're always going to have we don't have to, but we're going to always have to go to them, because we are being complicit in what they're doing. And so then it's just a what you call a boomerang effect. So it's something that we really have to layer as a group, and we have to figure out who that group is too. I say it all the time, like we can have these conversations all day long, but really becoming really intentional about doing the work so that we're not spinning, spiraling or spinning, and these continuously having, and I agree, we need to always have these conversations, but let's really be like, okay, how do we? Because, at this point in time, we're in a dire situation. So what are we going to do about it? Like, what are we actually going to do about it?
Yeah, it's funny because as you were speaking, I keep going back to the definition of imperialism. And, at the end of the day, everything you just explained, control. At the end of the day, control. I'm going to control your access to water. You talk about your access to good health, all of these things. I'm going to control it. I'm going to exploit it. I'm going to make sure that you pay for things that are supposed to be free.
Yep.
and to the point where it's become so normalized that we don't even bat an eye at it. It just is. It's like it's just that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I want to touch on I want to touch on this comment by Enya. She said, I guess that's we're in the middle. And I think she's talking about when we were talking about ancestors and ancestral like altars and things like that. I'm searching and I'm afraid because there's so much information. This is a journey. I've never met an ancestor. I would not know what to do. So you have most likely met an ancestor. You've anybody who has transitioned is now an ancestor. So a lot of times when we talk about figuring that part out, it's just tying yourself to one of the most recent ancestors if you felt like they lived a moral life, because you got to be, you want to be careful with different energies. But the piece I'll say to this, and this is not directed to you, Enya, but the piece I'll say is, because I was one of those Christians who went to church, put my hands up, getting all tearful because Jesus died on the cross for me. But then we turned a blind eye to our ancestors who were brutal. I mean, they literally died for us. So I think a lot of times we need to put those things into context and really think about what happened to them and the emotions. What emotions do you feel when you see that? Because if you don't, and I know you don't believe in what I know you're not a Christian, but what do we feel when we see things about our ancestors, and then what we feel about these other deities that were presented to us? So what emotions, that's just a question that I throw out to people. What emotions do you feel? And if you're not feeling as strong emotions for your ancestors that you're feeling for someone that you did not meet or your ancestors have met, then the question is, like, are you unlayering your thought processes and your filters? And what are it's a journey, because I can't say that I was always there. It takes time to feel that, because we have been indoctrinated to feel something. The whole movie, The Passion of Christ, right? That was meant to evoke emotion out of you. And so, but then we'll look at a slave movie, right? And that doesn't really evoke, it just makes you mad sometimes, but it doesn't necessarily evoke the same type of emotion. So, the manipulation is constantly there.
I just want to say really quickly on spirituality. And I think a whole conversation needs to be had about that, but it can be a scary journey to return. And I say return in the generational sense, return to our spirituality, because not only have we been indoctrinated with Christianity, but we've been taught that, these things are bad. And in some cases, some of these things would be considered, as we were talking about diagnoses, some of these would be considered psychosis. You know, if you're talking to someone who's not in front of you, that's considered psychosis, you know, according to the definition. So we have to, it really takes kind of walking through our fear. For me, it's helped to read from people who have practiced it for a long time.
Yeah.
Because right now there's so much on social media. A lot of people are sharing and they just kind of just started in it. And I know for me, when I first came into my spirituality, it was all over the place. Like it was all over the place. I was mixing different stuff together. I was like, dang, I wish somebody would have told me this stuff earlier. So anyway, I do suggest, you know, reading and learning from people, our elders who have been practicing it a long time. I first got built my altar after reading Sacred Woman by Queen Afua. This book, it just gives so much just in terms of health.
You can read that over
and spirituality. Yeah, you know, everybody on that. But it that really helps. And also the Healing Wisdom of Africa by Malidoma Somé. And just kind of like reading and learning and also tapping into what resonates with you. Because the thing about our spirituality, African spirituality, is actually very natural. But because we've been taken so far away from our natural selves that, you know, we feel like, I don't know, I guess we feel like we have to do certain things, or sometimes we take African concepts and put them into this European framework. It's a mind trip if you get deep into it. But it really is a natural thing. And so one thing that helps me is kind of just going with what resonates and what feels right in my spirit and in my soul. And that way I'm not just going through the motions or doing things that I consider to be African spirituality, but doing things that also are going to assist in my liberation on a mental, physical, and spiritual level.
Right. And that goes to why we do need to figure out this whole rites of passage thing, because that is going to help us with this whole concept. Because most of us who are coming from religious backgrounds, because I know I share some things with Hanifah. I couldn't talk about the things that I was going through because people are gonna look at you like you're crazy, you know. So, you know, it was only, you know, I can count on one hand the people I actually share some of those things with. But at the same time, it's just, you know, it's something that we have to learn. And I did say that we'll have that conversation. The women's side and the men's side, we need to have that conversation of rites of passage, as well as elders, Hanifah. We need to have that conversation because it's very important that we learn, because we don't, because just like you said, like most of us who turn from religion and we start trying to go towards African spirituality, to our sacred sciences, we are all over the place because we're just trying to figure it out. But if we had elders who are able to sit down with us, and some of us do find that eventually, but in the beginning, you're not like really able to really, you're just trying to figure it out yourself. And then, you know, there's a lot of people who'll say, you know, I told Hanifah this story. I asked questions to, you know, someone I respected, and I said, well, this is happening to me. I want to figure this thing out. And they said, oh, well, you live in Louisiana, so, you know, somebody will come to you. Like, you just got to ask your ancestors. And that's not necessarily always helpful for someone who's really trying to really get some answers and trying to figure out their spiritual walk and what direction to go to. But I did hear this conversation before, and they were saying that you gotta stop thinking that you have to be initiated into something. You know, you can follow that spiritual practice without being initiated into it. Initiations happen for people when they're trying to, you know, maybe take another step into a direction. But you, in essence, just because you're interested in that, just because you're vibing with it, just because you're finding that it is resonating with you, is something that you can end up doing and practicing. Just like you don't need a large altar with a gazillion amount of pictures and candles and all of this stuff. Like, you can have a very simple altar. So I think we are over, we're making it very complex when it talks about it, when we talk about our spirituality and how to start it. So it's like, just start. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to come back to you on the initiation piece.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna, if I could be straightforward in saying this, and it is not, I'm not saying it as a means to offend, but
Okay.
as you were saying, the initiation piece, I literally in that moment said, I was like, I disagree.
Okay.
Because I really believe that they are spiritual laws. The way that you were just explaining it, for me, I automatically went on and say that's a very Eurocentric approach to spirituality. It don't take all that, right? The all you have to do is this. And I said again, I'll probably talk to you on the phone about it. But for me, and I don't fully understand initiation, right? But from what I've gathered thus far, initiation opens doors that won't otherwise be open. That's just me. Now, to learn about spiritual practice, you don't need to be initiated. Okay. But to advance within that spiritual practice, I think initiation is absolutely necessary.
And I did say that. I said to get to a different level within it.
Okay.
So to get to a different level. But I think what happens is when we first get into something, we're like, oh, I gotta go get initiated, and you're not even at the point where you need to be initiated yet.
But that's why you have and that's so dangerous to me, because a lot of people are doing that today.
Yeah.
They're trying to jump, they're trying to take a shortcut. I was just sharing with my son's dad that we're in an age of, or dealing with a generation of, we are just gonna work smarter, not harder. Okay, that means we're gonna take some shortcuts if we have to. We're not taking the long way. Absolutely not. There are some things to be learned on the long path that the short path will never teach you, right? There are some things to see and observe the long way that you'll never see and observe taking a shortcut. Okay. We know that. We could be driving. We know there's certain sceneries that you will miss if you don't take a certain route. Okay. Such is spirituality, such is life. And then the other last thing I wanted to speak to was, even look, when these conversations happen in the media, like right now, it's the Will and Jada situation is hot. I tend to like go on a different level in observing it. One of the things that keep coming up for me is the definition of manhood. I've seen women trying to define manhood for men. I just don't know how that's possible. I just do not, for the life of me, know how that is possible. Okay, that is arrogant of a woman to think that she could define manhood for a man. It is disrespectful and it is arrogant. Same thing for men. You don't get to define womanhood for us. It is arrogant to do so. Right. Now, to say that, what I've been observing is we need to understand that the definition of manhood and womanhood is always connected to culture. What the culture defines what manhood and womanhood is, which means that the definition can evolve depending on the times that you're living in and the space you find yourself in. If you go to a certain culture, they say, this is what makes you a woman. You go to another culture, they say, this is what makes you a woman. And it's not always the same, because the culture defines manhood and womanhood for us. Now, as far as rites of passage, we need rites of passages around manhood and womanhood. We do. We are not born with these things. These things are not things that we are innate to us. It is taught. It is taught, and it is taught by the culture that we exist in and the people that make up the culture, right? So we're out here, females or ladies, thinking that we're women simply because we have a vajiji. We're out here running around thinking that we're men. They're men because they have a phallus. That's not how it works. So when we talk about rites of passage, and you're talking about initiation and rites of passage, I think we even need that as far as manhood and womanhood goes. You get what I'm saying? Because we are lacking that tremendously as a people, tremendously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what we were speaking to maybe a couple lives ago about the whole idea of rites of passage for men and for women, and understanding, because we're behind, as far as that goes, because we think that just because we have certain body parts, it's even initiation into motherhood. A lot of us think just because we have babies, we're automatically a mother. Some of us think just because we have, a lot of men think just because they have procreated, they're automatically fathers. Like, it's an initiation into that needs to happen, and how we take those roles very seriously. So that is that is a whole lots of layers to that, as far as what initiation needs to look like in our communities, so that we can start getting these things right. And that's why I say we need to start having kind of we need to start having something that is written out, so that we can agree on what all of these things look like in our community. Because when we start talking about people in our communities and who needs to hold whom accountable and all this different kind of stuff, it would be understood, because all we have to do is we could go to that document, or we could go to our elder council, and they would be able to discuss what needs to be done to an individual who we thought maybe morally corrupt or did something that was egregious in our community, in the public, whatever it may be. But we have to start having those conversations, so that we can start actually putting that into action. And that's not to say that
We can't wait until everyone gets on board either. That's the other
Exactly.
part of it too.
Exactly.
Because, like, you know what I think? You know what I often think about? Like, when we think about the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King, and so what happens is, like, let's say there's a country and there's like a little part of that country where something is happening. This is the power of the media. The media takes that and it zooms in on that, right? And if you're not careful, your mind begins to think there is a war in America.
Right.
No, there's not a war in America. There's fighting happening in the state of Maryland, in the county, in PG County, Maryland. Okay, there's fighting happening in PG County, Maryland. Let's be clear.
Right.
But if the media constantly pushes that, your mind actually be like, wow, America is one big ghetto. I mean, I won't disagree with you, but it's like America, but it's just one part of America. But the reason why I say that is because we think of the civil rights era, and we make this assumption that everybody was on board. We make that assumption that Black people across America was down for the cause, and that is not true.
Yep.
There are some Black people that did not boycott those buses.
Yep.
Okay. Some of them was like, bump you guys, I'm riding the bus, I'm not doing this. So I think it's important for us to know that it's really about building first with like-minded people, and then allowing that to expand, versus we waiting for everybody to get on board before we actually start doing. I hope I'm clear.
That's exactly a point that I've been making, because we do have to start small, and then grow. So the ones that are ready to build, we have to actually start taking action in what that looks like. And and you made a good point about everybody not being on board, because they said a lot of the leaders were hated. Like, weren't liked by a lot of Black people. They said if Harriet Tubman existed today, she probably wouldn't necessarily be liked by a large majority of Black people. So we have to understand, that's why, a lot of times when we hear each other calling each other racist because we have certain viewpoints, that it's because of we lack something within ourselves, and it's making us is making is highlighting the things that we lack within ourselves, or that we desire, but it's in opposition of what is actually best for our well-being. So, that could look like a lot of different things. And then when somebody points it out, because even when it comes to spirituality, when people start pointing out things within spirituality and people go into defense, because it's just like, why are you, it points out things that you should be doing. Or when it comes to different relationships that are preferences, it points out, nobody wants to think that they don't have a say in their preference of who they're choosing to procreate with or choosing to be in relationships with. But what is happening is that when you start pointing those things out and saying, hey, that's not really a quote unquote preference, but that has actually been indoctrinated within you, that has been put inside, put in your mind, because again, we have been in this system of oppression for hundreds of years, and the media has been feeding us for hundreds of years. Is that really is that really a preference, or is that something that was put into your mind? So it's pointing out certain things within ourselves that we either feel like we're lacking or feel like we're supposed to be doing. And so a very good point. I am was somebody about to say something? Yes, Danique, we need to start moving with the majority instead of waiting for everyone. So, and that might not even be the majority. Hanifah made a good point a while ago about how it starts, you have a whole group of people. It might be big. Everybody's like, yeah, we want to build. And then it ends up becoming smaller when it really gets to the action steps. So it might not even be the majority. It might be a few people. It might be, a handful of people at first. But then we have to say, if we're going to do this thing, to really start taking action. And so, and what that looks like. And hopefully we can figure out what that looks like so that we can actually get to actually building and doing the things that we need to do within our communities. So this conversation was really good. I really appreciate you. And so I'm just going to let y'all give your last thoughts. Tell us how we can find you, social media, whatever you're on, how we can continue to stay in touch with you. So, Sister Rhonda, tell me how we can stay in contact with you and what you have going on.
Okay. So I can be found on Facebook and Instagram under the same name. On Facebook, I do have an artist page. I'm a spoken word artist. So the artist page, you won't really get updates on there. So it's better to follow me or add me as a friend on my Facebook page, my personal Facebook page. But yes, I do spoken word, and that's primarily the way that I convey what I feel like our people need to hear and understand in terms of racism and who we are and how we're going to get out of this situation. So if you're interested in poetry or spoken word or just hearing some of the things that I have to say, please feel free to join me on those social media platforms. I'm working to get on other platforms. I mean, I am on other platforms, but those are my primary ones. And I also, if you want to just see my videos, I'm also on YouTube, again, under the same name, Rhonda Sekhmet Ra. And you can find me there. So I appreciate so much this conversation. I learned stuff during this conversation. I was taking notes myself. So thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for having this platform to, just help to progress us and help us to think about things differently so we can get closer to where we need to be.
Yes, thank you so much for joining, and you are free to come back anytime, and I will reach out to you for other conversations. I really appreciate your input. I really do.
Thank you.
Was my turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
Oh, I enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I didn't expect anything otherwise. You guys are two ladies that I respect highly. I mean, that goes without saying. So I was interested in really having, engaging in this conversation with you guys as usual. Um, I already knew it was going to be kind of a not tough, but a challenging conversation to have because we are on a public platform, and
Mhm.
oftentimes we are careful how we talk about racism. And I think we don't need to be careful how we talk about racism anymore. I think we just need to talk about it.
Right.
So I thank you for allowing the space for us to come and do so freely. I am Hanifah Nailah on YouTube. You can follow me at Hanifah Nailah on YouTube. Um, I talk about mainly things that have to do with self development. This Friday, I am going to be tackling a very tough topic, but a very much needed topic in our community. It's going to be about sexual abuse.
Mm.
Our guest is going to come. This is her story. She is going to talk about it, and we are just going to talk about the elephant in the Black community, which
Yes.
is sexual abuse. Because I think a lot of our issues that we're dealing with in dealing with each other, specifically the woman or the woman and men, male, female, so-called gender war. A lot of the hidden issues in that has to do with sex, sexuality, and so forth, but no one talks about it because it is the elephant in the room. And so I wanted to bring this sister on. I may be going on probably a 30-day break from all social media, and that includes YouTube. And I am okay with that because I have other things that I need to focus my energy on. But that's pretty much my YouTube page in a nutshell. So make sure that you guys pass through Friday at 5 p.m., where we're going to have a discussion about the elephant in the Black community, which is sexual abuse. This sister has a very powerful testimony. So make sure you come out and hear it. Continue to keep doing what you're doing. This is a much needed space, a much needed platform. I already see you have a next guest lined up for this week. Keep bringing in your guests. Keep talking. Your tribe will find you, right? And the people that need what you are serving will find you. They'll smell it from a mile away, and they will come running, and they are going to come here and they're going to feast with you. So don't be discouraged. You are doing a hell of a job, and you're doing a good thing over here. I just wanted to say that.
Thank
And
you.
Rhonda, salute to you always, sis. You know that. It's
Mhm.
always respect and salute. I was telling my aunt about you, and I was like, this sister is surrounded by elders. The level of wisdom that she's constantly being that's imparted, I'm like, she will be good. So I'm
Thank
super
you.
super glad that we did this, and I look forward to doing many many more when I come off of my break, possibly. Oh, and just to let you guys know, uh your girl is getting married.
Oh,
Congratulations!
tell me when. I gotta be there.
Not like that. I'll talk to you, my aunt. But yes, that's some good news. you
Oh,
know. Yeah.
yes. Black love. I love it.
Oh, that just makes me happy.
Oh, yeah. So that's pretty. Even though most people that know us, even including my family, they thought we were married already.
Yeah. Yeah.
I literally have to tell people we're not. But it's kind of how we move. It's kind of how we live. Like people automatically assume that. But yes, we are making it official in
Yeah.
July. So
Beautiful.
yeah.
July. Oh, July wedding. Oh, that's awesome. So yes, I am having a guest on Friday. We are going to be doing a series in April, where we're talking about health issues within the Black community. So her name is Dr. Tammy Matthews. She is just a delightful, energetic person. Really respect and appreciate her. I'll tell you more about her on Friday, but that is Friday at 3 o'clock. Come on, sit down, because we are going to talk about how we restore our health in the Black community, because we need to know how to restore our health. So we're going to have that conversation on Friday at 3:00. So if you can come through, if not, catch the replay. And you can come and ask her questions because she is a holistic practitioner. She has, lots of, she has a lot. I'll let her talk to you about everything that she has done in her journey. But yeah, I'm excited about that conversation as well. I do want to start having more conversations about health in this space because it's really important. And some of us don't know that we're sick, even though that we're walking around sick. So we just really need to have those conversations. But again, I just thank you for this conversation, ladies. I really appreciate it. I can't say enough about how wonderful this was, and I'll be in touch with you, Sister Rhonda and Hanifah. You have that. I need to have a conversation with you. And yeah, so I'm thankful you are a part, Rhonda, you're a part of this family now. So again, you're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, ladies, peace to you and peace to everyone in the chat. And I will see you next time. Peace, family.
Peace.